Greetings, greetings, greetings. It is I, your king, Clifford Jefferson, ascended down from the house of Godfrey under the fifth kind of Banju, son of folk of Jerusalem, incarnation of King Edgar Jefferson, or King Edgar the Peaceful, also known as the King of Peace. Beside me, always beside me, is none other than Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont, here again to address certain issues that have arisen, which definitely need some dealing with. We're an ecclesiastical organization incorporated in lieu of our common law, which we know is statutory legislation, in lieu of the jurisdiction that we are under, which means law declared. We're getting a lot of feedback out there in regards to people who are making comments on our website in regards to the video, and like, you're free to have your own comments, but when it comes to religious societies and ecclesiastical jurisdiction, this is not to be taken lightly. This is a whole different arena. Unfortunately, a lot of people are upset about my growth as a man or a student of ecclesiastical, historical, as well as the juror law. They're uniform and must be understood that way. Because if not, one would be considered abstract and one would be considered concrete. And what we do here at the English Church is provide concrete information in regards to our religious customary traditions, in regards to the honoring of our saints, our martyrs, in regards to the honoring of the one you see before us on the screen, which is King Edgar the Peaceful. This is our Jesus Christ. And he just happened to look like me, absent of my dreads, which I will be getting back real soon. So stay tuned. I have amongst me some of the greatest minds that one could ever have amongst them or by his side. And I say that to say is that a lot of things are being said with a lack of understanding of why it's being said. And what I mean by that is that, people are looking for things, to help somewhat find themselves. And that is a lonesome journey. A lot of political platforms, a lot of religious platforms, a lot of theological platforms are out there, and they're claiming to be a political or governmentally structured in regards to expressing the will of whatever nation they so-called say they come from. This one in particular is the Moorish Society. Moorish Americans, this goes for all of each and every one of you. We have nothing against you. You have the right to your own birthright in your own land, according to your own customs, according to your own language, according to your own traditions. These things are inherited. This falls under what we call the law of Hereditaments. We just did a previous podcast prior to this one. So it would be in your best interest to view that one before you watch this one, because this is to dissolve any misinformation about the Third Temple English Church reformed from the English Church of England in regards to the task that we were brought here to do. We are descendants of our heirs based off the inheritance that was left by the grant to the king, King Edgar the Peaceful. He was the ruler and emperor of all of Albion. A lot of y'all assume that Albion is associated with the so-called European races, and that's just not true. We're going to prove it here today. It was under the trusteeship of European nations as tenant-in-chiefs, lords of the manor, whatever you want to call them, but they were managers of our vast estate. And in order for you to have a vast estate, this comes from the laws of Hereditaments. And if you define the law of the Hereditaments, that deals with corporal and incorporeal. And our last lesson we did justifiably explains that. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, I'm gonna let Archbishop say a couple of words, and then we'll get to the point of dissolving and abolishing any other thesis brought forth by any Moorish American, any Aboriginal, any Native American, any American, in regards to an inheritance in lieu of an estate here on this so-called territory now in modern day called North America. And this also includes Canada. The reason why I'm saying this is because there is a particular Moor called Cujo. And I know the brother, I sat down with him when I was a member of the Moorish Scientific of America. I was the assistant Grand Sheikh there. And I'm no longer associated with the Moorish Scientific of America, and there's a reason why. My Grand Sheikh was Lord Nature El Bey. I provided information before, but apparently I have to give it again. Grand Nature Lord Bey is a good man, he taught me a lot on his tutelage, but I had to go for myself, and I presented these same questions to him, and he couldn't answer them. So therefore, it put me on another journey and another quest. So I have no ill feelings about Brother Nature. What I do have a problem with is brothers bringing claims against me and mentioning Nature's name. So if Brother Nature is watching this video, I suggest that you watch your friends real closely. But this one is in particular for Brother Cujo Bey, because he somehow seems to feel as though that I'm a sellout. And so when you use it,
Okay.
traditions and customs and laws that qualify or justify the reason for a person being called a sellout. Now, I brought this information to my Grand Sheikh on the reason why I had a problem with the procedural process and the customs and traditions that fall under the guidelines of what we call the Moorish Scientific of America. And he couldn't answer them. And as the assistant Grand Sheikh, I'm responsible for my flock. And the brothers and sisters who were there, this is from young to old, were sitting there like first graders, waiting to see who could explain what it is that they've been rehearsing day in and day out in the Moorish Scientific of America. And through my diligent studies, I've learned to explain the meaning of what was stated by Noble Drew Ali, who prophesied about this day and time, if you read his prophecies and hadiths. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, we're just going to explain this again. Once again, this is for Cujo L, all his viewers, and every other Moorish Scientific of America or any other ethnicity here in North America to claim to have an inheritance here in what we call now North America, because you have no inheritance. And we're going to explain that why. I digress. I leave Archbishop to his opening statement.
Greetings once again, people from the Kingdom of England, Empire of Albion. As I, Archbishop Belmont from the Noble House of Belmont. And like the King have just said, we shouldn't have to come out and say what we already have said before. But sometimes we have to come down off our positions or seats to come and address matters that need to be addressed. Here on the Third Temple, English Church of England, or the King's Bench, only enemy we have is the enemy of forgetfulness. And that's what we've been trying to combat our entire existence, is trying to remember who we were, going back to a time when we lived in prosperity and peace and harmony amongst our brothers and sisters. And like the King has said, we were on a path that we thought was going to bring us to that to that oasis, but it was just part of the path. It was just a branch that was going to lead us right to the root. And what we did was we didn't throw away everything we learned. We put aside what we no longer needed and took the gems that was going to help enrich our travels as we continue to find who we were or who we are today in this day and age as Englishmen. We don't have anything, any animosity against anyone, but when you start making, claims, accusations, pointing fingers, or trying to defame who we are by trying to make our character seem less than godly, then that's when we have to come down and start speaking the truth. We already show you, many of the brothers and sisters who've been paying attention to our channel, the information we're coming from, it's not coming from an abstract reality. We all started there at a point in time, but eventually it had to condense into something that was tangible, something that you can see. And what the king have shown with his work is that the MSTA was just, like I said, one of the places that will help bring you to the understanding of a nationality that we have lost. But they were not our fathers. They were just the ones that help us get back home to where we come from. Grand Sheik Kujoel, this is going to be, our last time addressing you. We know that you're speaking out of a place of hurt. We know who you are and we know how you operate. Even your prophet told you not to throw away your Bibles. And your Bible told you that those who call themselves Moabites and the descendants of Moabites can never enter into the church. Maybe the Roman Catholic Church, but not the English Church. The English Church and the Roman Catholic Church are not the same. The English Church predates the Roman Catholic Church. The English Church was here prior to the so-called Reformation that happened and took place via of a Roman Catholic missionary coming in and trying to convert the Anglo-Saxons all the way over into what we call Catholicism today. And it didn't come all the way out into fruition until after the 14th, 15th centuries. So we already bringing this understanding to a head to the people who don't understand this, those who keep trying to run away from the English church. This is the true visible church. It was taken away from you because you did not want to honor where you come from. So it was taken away from you until a time came when the King of Peace, the de jure King of Peace, returned to come and get his flock. We only here for only 144,000. We're not here for everybody, and we're not here for anybody who don't want to honor who they come from via that settlement certificate, which you call a birth certificate. You throw away your serf name, there's nothing we can do for you. You can want to be Els, Bays, Alis, then you need to go over to the nations where those names or those titles are recognized. Because as far as we're concerned, El in the Spanish language, it means the. Bay goes back to the Turks or Ottoman Turks. Ali goes back to Islam as well. And Islam, as far as I was concerned, it means peace. And the King of Peace is here. So if you truly are so-called practicing Islam, then this should be the way that you should be headed. Because if you look at the seal and the symbol from King Richard I, from the time immemorial, 1189, his symbol is the symbol that you so-called right now utilize, which lets us know that you are in violation of your ancestors that goes back to time immemorial. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and allow the king go ahead and present this beautiful connection, or I'm going to say the topic, for those once and for all who keep trying to claim this landmass as their own. It's not Americans. It's not for so-called Aboriginal or indigenous people. Those are all fictions that was created to take you away from who you were as Anglo-Saxon Berbers, Englishmen. And they have to be an Aboriginal or Indian mouth to tell you and show you the so-called this landmass is actually Albion or the English. And we're going to show you. I digress.
Well said, Archbishop. And as we said so many times, this is not to hurt you, this is to instruct you, because a lot of instructions won't be understood unless it's painful or it's hurtful. We're not going to pacify you. We're not going to pacify anybody. We're just going to give you the straight, blunt truth. because it's not emotional. You know, energy is emotional and it can be destructive, you know, if it's not used correctly. All right. Power in the hands of the fool can be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So as you see here, you see a king. This is King Edgar the Peaceful. The last name Jefferson is come from Godfrey, which means peaceful territory. This king ruled from 943 to 975. As you can see, he has a crown on his head.
Hold on 1 second, King. That's not on the screen if that's what you want to show.
Oh, give me 1 second. You showing?
Yep.
Okay, this is the King Edgar the Peaceful. He was the first king of England that ever wore actual crown. The Kingdom of England lasted from 927 to 1707. Prior to that, we were living in tribes of Anglo-Saxon Berbers. And we're going to prove that today by virtue of the fact of the calendar. This is called the Old Style calendar. The Old Style calendar is called the Julian calendar. The New Style calendar is called the Gregorian calendar, initiated by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582. When you see the crown on the king's head, our crown is symbolic of authority. And as we know, authority comes from the qualifications of the office that the one that's in authority holds. And authority comes from the wisdom that he has. And to us, that represents the locks. And as you can see, Archbishop has his locks. Michael Judah has his locks. Now, as the king, I sacrifice my locks to be subject to the same type of discretionary that my people are. But my lock will be reattached as a result of me going to the lowest depth of understanding and rising to the pinnacle of overstanding, in which we will show you that we have today. This is the reason why we are called the English Third Temple Church of England. For all those who want to believe in fairy tales, this is one you should believe in it, because this is the abstract to the concrete, the belief to the real, the fiction to the nonfiction. Understand it in its entirety. This is King Edgar the Peaceful. He's called the Emperor of Albion. He's called the Emperor of Albion. Very important. The brother got locks. The picture is in black and white, but you can clearly see the facial features of this brother is truly are Berberish. Okay. Now it's very important to understand the time era that we're dealing with. This is called the late Middle Ages. All right. When this king ruled as well as his family ruled throughout antiquity. It goes time immemorial, means time out of mind. But the views cannot go back as far, as well as the Moorish Americans. They can't go back that far because it was a time where they were not. Noah Drali told you, time never was when man was not. The time will come when man began, the time will come where he will be no more. So your history stops with Moorish. Your history stops with Moorish, and that's within the 16th century. We're going to show you. All right. First of all, let me explain the laws of Hereditaments. Hereditaments deals with the laws of inheritance. And only for you to be subject to the law of Hereditaments in lieu of inheritance, you must be an heir. You must be an heir. Estates left for heirs are called entail estates. Under Allolio, entail estates under Allolio contrast to feudal simple or freehold estates, which are under feudal tenure. Feudal tenure had been abolished in 1660. It's been abolished in 1660. It has also been abolished in modern day statutes under what we call common law. Because common law falls in two categories, as I stated just a minute ago. Common law means, for us, legislative statutory law. Yeah, and we was talking about Hereditaments, pardon for the interruption. But before we go further, we want to talk about Hereditaments. Hereditaments deals with inheritance. And the inheritance is for heirs. And only for inheritance that's left for heirs, it must be left inside what we call a trust. A trust is dealt with by trustees, which are usually held by what we call an attorney, or what we call power of attorney, which is the attorney. And most of the attorneys are associated with banks. All right, so now when you're dealing with hereditaments, which is based off inheritance, which is based off or established by an heir, there must be a trust known as the estate. And the estate is the net worth of a person's assets, whether they're dead or alive. And usually this falls in the line of what we call property law, title property. All right, it's very important. And the highest form of property here, particularly in what we call the United States, is land. Because without land, you have no commodities. You can't carry things around on your back. You know, you got on land, you're gonna be an ocean. So that's merchant. That falls under the laws of merchant and commerce. All this is a form of what we call capitalism, feudalism. All right, all this is done based off who has the most authority. So dealing with the laws of hereditaments, dealing with inheritance of heirs in regards to the real estate, there must be some type of link to that inheritance. Falls into two categories, incorporeal or corporal. Incorporeal or corporal. Listen, Moors. Listen, Cujo. Corporal and corporal. Corporal meaning things you can touch, feel, grasp, take, hold of. In this case, for you, it would be fee and simple leasehold, which falls in the feudal kingdom because you're on allodial land. So for us, it would be sucage because you have to pay us for being on our land, which is governed under England. We're going to prove that in a minute. How we know that? Because of the qualifications and the procedure of the laws of hereditaments and dealing with inheritance of an heir in regards to a trust that deals with an estate, left in a will or by an heir. Now, there is no wills left because all those records were destroyed. So the only thing left is an heir. And some of the qualifications in the laws of hereditaments falls in what we call a surname. A surname falls under the laws of what they call inherited genetics, based off inherited information, which is called DNA. Once again, inherited genetics is associated with your surname based off inherited information, which is based off your DNA, because your surname denotes to your family name.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very important, especially when it deals with an inheritance as an heir and in lieu of real property, especially here in what we call North America today, because we know North America was established by way of treaties. And when we say treaty, we have to go far as back as the Treaty of 1679.
Mm-hmm.
1763, Treaty of Paris. This deals with Spain, France, and Great Britain. Great Britain succeeded their territory to the United States in 1789, Treaty of Paris. This is a result of the Roman Catholic influence here in North America under who we call John Carroll. All right, follow the rabbit hole, y'all. Follow the rabbit hole. It's gonna be plain and simple. So now, the reason how we as heirs of the estate claim to make such a claim on such a allodial property is because of what we call engrams or autobiological memory, which falls right in line with what we call inherited genetics, DNA, because this information is locked in your genes. It's incorporeal. You can't touch it. You can't see it. You can't touch it. I'm pretty sure, Brother Kuzi, you're sitting to yourself thinking like, where I come from, who my people. You're only going based off what somebody told you, but you don't really feel it inside. You don't know it inside. Because for one, you're speaking another nation's language, using another nation's laws, using another nation's customs, traditions, because you don't speak Arabic. You ain't even got an Arabic name. You're not on Muslim land, and there's no Muslim custom originated here in North America. It's allowed under religious freedom, but it has no origin here. There's a trick in that, religious freedom. You can believe in a cat and dog if you wanted to. That's your preference. Because you got a lot of members as what we call the public here in North America. And the public goes back to time immemorial. You call it a commonwealth now. Do you know what a commonwealth is? It resulted from the English Civil War when the Privy Council and the House of Lords were abolished by the same kings who granted out charters here to foreigners such as you. We're going to prove it. All right? This is how we know this, because it's in our DNA. We daydream about this, not while we sleep, and while we up in our waking time. We internally go through this, and it affects and disrupt the internal disrupts the external. So I mean, as a result of us remembering, it's able to facilitate and internally and externally manifest right before our eyes. We're going to prove that, because this guy looks exactly like me if I had my dreads on my head.
Sure does.
You got the picture, Brother Kuju, up on your website talking about I'm a sellout. But I'm going to tell you who is the real sellout, because as I'm telling you, you only worship Noble Ali. I don't hear nothing in your comments about Allah. All you talk about is Noble Ali, who is a man just like you. Absolutely. And I'm not saying that man ain't a God, but his position didn't elevate you to a godlike status, like I'm about to elevate you to awareness of my godlike status here in this day and time as the king of the Third Temple English Church, reformed from the English Church of England, incorporated as corporation soul, if you know what that means, under ecclesiastical jurisdiction. So that means that I'm a natural person incorporated at the same time, because under the laws of inheritance, the title of a grantor, a lieu of an heir of entail estate, passed on by what we call operation of law in common law.
Absolutely.
Operation of law. But we have been declared extinct. Why? Because there ain't no English people, but yet you speak the language.
And have the surname.
You don't speak no other language but English, but you don't want to be that. And I'm going to tell you as the result of that, what the consequences are. So let's move on. So we discussed hereditaments in lieu of inheritance of an heir dealing with an estate known as the trust, held by trustees, which are on your land right now, which you call foreigners. Which you call foreigners in your post. You said how I'm the king and I got foreigners on my land, and how I'm going to remove them, I'm about to show you. But if you were in the position and that as king, how would you remove foreigners off your land? You can't, because you are a foreigner.
You are a foreigner.
And I'm about to prove it. I'm a king. All right? Not by the crown that's on the head, of the crown of my information here. That's my crown. Let's show you. Agnatic succession. You see the title. We blow it up so everybody can see it.
And point of interest for all of you brothers and sisters who keep trying to say that Wikipedia is not a reputable outlet for information. I like to say that you're 100% incorrect. The thing is, this information can go be verified. It's like I said, reference check. We don't have time to be sitting here and popping up books all day long to say the same thing that they're going to show you right here, because they still have to have some factual information that still goes back to truth. Now we're not saying this is the end all be all to it, but right now you're dealing with the time that you don't have that much time for you to be sitting there and trying to figure this out through books when you haven't been reading anything of this magnitude for quite some time. So those urgent messengers like we are now have come to return to come bring this information to those who need it. We ain't for everybody.
All right. We're just going to hip and skip. Now we're going to show you what resulted as a result of cognitive succession. If you'll know what that means if you watch our previous videos. This is why we say start from the beginning. You don't want to start from the beginning. You want to jump in on the scene. If you jumping in on something, that means that you was not a part of the original line. You cutting in line. You can't do that. You got to start. You cutting the people that's in front of you. All right. Read what agnatic succession means, Archbishop.
Agnatic seniority is a patrilineal principle of inheritance, where the order of succession to the throne prefers the monarch's younger brother over the monarch's own sons. A monarch's children, the next generation, succeed only after the males of the elder generation have all been exhausted. Agnatic seniority essentially excludes females of the dynasty and their descendants from the succession. Contrast agnatic primogeniture, where the king's sons stand higher in succession than his brothers.
Now stop. We're talking about the king's son. We ain't talking about the mother, father, son. We're talking about the king's son. The king is a station. When you're talking about a regular son, we're talking about a king. King is a title. King is a station. Represents obligations. You know what I'm saying? So just like a president, just like a secretary, just like a fireman, a cook, they represent different stations. That's why surnames were given to you. How I know that? Let's go here. We ain't got time to go do this again. Read right here, in the late Middle Ages.
All right. In the later Middle Ages, violence directly involving the monarch and his heirs became less of a factor as they gradually decreased their personal participation in combat. Sons were much more likely to survive to adulthood and to marry than in the previous centuries, when many noble families lost adolescent sons to constant warfare. In addition, the living conditions and nutrition of the nobility improved, leading to fewer miscarriages and decreased infant and childhood mortality. Daughters were therefore needed less and less to trace succession. In many cultures, surnames are agnatically determined.
Did y'all hear that? Agnatically determined by your surname. Now we're gonna click that in a second, but let me just see a couple of examples that they have here. Now, like we said, we can't always depend on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is just a source, but we go back and fact check what Wikipedia say. Exactly. Don't believe everything you hear. It's truth and lies mixed in together. How we know this is the truth? Why? Because We remember. We remember because it's in our DNA. That's called inherited genetics based off the information. When you read something, you know it's true because your body don't say it's true. Your mind say it's true. Your mind is not attached to your body, Brother Cujo. It's intangible. You can't touch it. The mind is there to interpret what you can touch with the corporal. The things you can touch. Anything the mind do, the body will follow. And only the body can obtain corporal things, things you can touch, hold, feel. But we know we lost that, what we call kinetic succession. Why? Because it broke agnatic succession. The example of such a thing is right here, County of Anjou, where the Plantagenet crown under Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, whose son was Henry II, where John, who signed the Magna Carta, where all charters derived their authority from. And remember, dealing with land inheritance, the deed is the baby of a charter. Look it up. Deed is the baby of the charter. But there must be a clear chain of title. But there ain't no clear chain of title. Why? Because titles here in the United States as well as Canada are what we call abstract properties, or what we call fee and simple. The first form of fee and simple, i.e. estates and land here in North America, was in 1787 under the Northwest Ordinances, which are founding fathers. And they was broke. They were broke. This is how far we go back. We were never broke. We were the creditors. How we know that? Read it, Archbishop.
It says, the County of Anjou followed inheritance by agnatic seniority when Henry II of England married Eleanor of Aquitaine, creating the Angevin Empire. This resulted in some question over what inheritance laws would affect their children, as Henry II's father was the Count of Anjou, and he inherited England and Normandy through his mother. Henry II.
Now, guess what? Now, we just read dealing with agnatic succession is inherited through surname. My last name is Jeffrey or Godfrey with the prefix son, which come down from. This falls under the laws of hereditaments, inherited, dealing as an heir, and dealing with estates left in the trust by the trustees, which are the so-called proprietors or the so-called colonists, known as the 13 British colonies under the province of New Jersey in 1664. I descend down, going back to the County of Anjou, which you see in our formal at the 13th English Church, you see flying behind me and Archbishop Belmont from his respective houses. But as we can see, the County of Anjou followed the inheritance of agnatic seniority when Henry II, son of Godfrey, the 5th Count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem, the King of Peace. So what are you talking about, bro? What are you talking about? I ain't no king. I descended from kings.
Exactly.
You don't even have a surname showing where you descended down from.
Absolutely.
You descended from some other country. Comments, Archbishop?
Oh no, like you had said, and which we're proving, which we have been proving here on the King's Bench, we are the descendants of those kings and queens who have come and gone. And through our DNA is how we can bring them back. And that's what we're doing. It's our obligation as heirs to live and remember them. If we don't, we no longer exist.
Exactly. That's called genetic information. We're giving you this genetic information so you can return back into your inheritance left for you as an heir in regards to the estate that so-called America are trustees of. But you don't want to be an Englishman. So you don't want your inheritance. You have no inheritance here, especially if it don't come through my house, because as far as you can go back to time immemorial, it's Richard I. He was the son of Henry II. Henry II, eldest son, young Henry died before him, so the throne passed to the next oldest son, Richard I of England. Do you know who that is, brother? You have no idea. So don't come tell me about what I don't know. Don't come question me about how I know I'm not a king. I know I'm a king. Godfrey, that's Jefferson right there. Let's go there so the viewers will know what I'm talking about. Go say I made this up.
Yeah, we're going to show you both of our families because, like history has said back then, we was always connected.
Always connected. We're going to show you mine, and we're going to show you Brother Belmont, Archbishop Belmont.
Point of interest, if you want to be able to go and verify and search their families, surname and the origin where they come from, follow our footsteps, because this is the only way you're going to be able to connect the dots to bring yourself out of the fictitious world, the delusions that many of our brothers have succumbed to. Because the only way for you to be able to come out of the water, which is the emotions, you got to ground yourself, which is the land. And England's the only one that own the land.
Yes, sir. Jefferson, the history of family crest, coats of arms. Jefferson's surname is a patronymic name that comes from the person named Godfrey or Godfrey. These names appear in Old English as Geoffrey, in Old French as Geoffroy or Geoffrey. The surname Jefferson makes the use of patronymic suffix son, which has superseded all other suffixes in popularity by the 14th century. It was most common in north of Britain. The suffix was sometimes abbreviated as S. All right. And they have another one. Let me go here. Then we do archbishops. Let's do archbishops now.
And point of interest, if you notice the other crest from Jefferson, you know, the X, the Black Panther.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go there. See if I can find that one. Right there.
Yeah, that was the one that's under, if you went straight under English, you showed the one underneath Welsh. But see, but that's one thing many people don't understand about the history of Wales and England. They're the one and the same.
There you go. This is England. That's the panther. That's the cross.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Chiro. This is what the Roman Empire is built on, the Chiro. All right? Y'all see it right there.
And it's like the king just showed you, our names or surnames had different variations because back then there really wasn't any specific set of rules on how you can actually spell your name. So people are spelled it how it phonetically sound. But that doesn't mean that it lost its original meaning.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's do Brother Belmont.
Belmont. And another reason why we're saying about variations, because see, many places our families will maybe lose a letter or add a letter, and it will show a new nation. And you would think that you're not composed or coming from those other nations, that letter probably didn't exist. But in actuality, you did. So, so we're gonna go ahead and read my family. Belmont. So Belmont is a name that was carried to England in the Great Wave of migration from Normandy following the Norman conquest of 1066. Now, Bernard the Dane, he was the predecessor of the House of Belmont, going back to the year 911. Now, the year 911 is the year where the Charter of Saint Clair, which brought in the creation of Normandy. All right. It says the Belmont family lived in Dorset and Gloucestershire. There existed at a remote period a family of Belmont in Normandy, and it was probably one of its cadets whose name was inscribed on the muster roll at battle. Certain it is that he could not have been the founder. Something about that. Technical. All right, so like I said, certain is that he could not have been the founder of this illustrious House of Belmont, which in 2 centuries after appears so prominently conspicuous among the most potent barons of the realm, and which was established in this country by Henry de Beaumont, the 4th son of Agnes de Beaumont by her husband, Louis, the 2nd son of Charles, the King of Jerusalem, and nephew of Louis IX of France. So we're showing you that my family not only goes back to the kings of France, as well as the King of Jerusalem, but that title King of Jerusalem was supposed to be saved for the true King of Jerusalem, who has returned as King Edgar the Peaceful, which is our King Clifford Jefferson. The reason why,
Yeah, go ahead. Finish
I
your
was
thought.
about to say, and the reason would make this that much more important to know was because the Beaumonts, we were always right next to the sides of the kings ever since coming from so-called Normandy. So when we came in, some of our families were in favor of the King of England, and some was in that favors of William the Conqueror. We were related on both sides, but it's our obligation and duty as those who know the rightful heir, who's the agnatic succession, supposed to be on the throne. And my obligation is to make sure that the true king sits on that throne. And why I'm showing you my family is because my family blood courses through every last kingdom that's on this earthly plane on this side of the Atlantic. That's from the kingdom of Aragon, Castile, the kingdom of Alba, as well as we're showing you too, the kingdom of England. And that's by the marriages of the women from the house of noble house of Beaumont. 3 of them. You have all 3 of their name was Isabel de Beaumont.
Remember the key words: Spain, France. Remember these terms, because we're showing you that all this is affecting where you at right now in North America, pertaining to the Norman conquest, the invasion of the schisms. Remember, you had 2 schisms. You had the schism in 1056 on the western part of what we call Europe, and you had the one in 1066, which was invaded of England. This is called, at this time, Britannia. Britannia is what you now call Great Britain, which came about in 1707. Prior to that, all this was called Albion, by way of 2 colonies, and we'll get to that later, because y'all still associate Albion with Europeans, and you don't know nothing about what you're talking about.
Nothing.
So as we said, Archbishop specifically said that it's good and bad mixed in together. That's like Wikipedia. It's up to you to find out what's the truth and what's the bad, what's the false and what's the truth in it. It's your obligation. That's what we're doing. We ain't just believing what we see. We're going back and checking if it's abstract or concrete, and that's based off the land.
Exactly.
That's the record. Recordation. When you file a land in lieu of a deed, you file it on the recordation. That's county records. The majority you don't understand that the county and municipalities are created by acts of legislation in lieu of a de facto charter, which, according to the original charter, is a violation of Article 1, 6, and 10. Protecting the propensity of contract. We're going to show you that in case law, which is the opposite of our common law, which is which is statutory legislation. Their common law is Hereditary, which is case law. We're going to show you in their Hereditary where it says that the common law ruled in regards to real property here in North America. We're going to show you that it all goes back to the crown. Any so-called claim by a Native American, called a Moor, Indian, etc., Aboriginal titles, which are surrendered back to the crown because they're not allodial. They're fee and simple, or estates and land, either for life or absolute. All right, let's go further. All right, so once again, let me get a picture of the king. This is our Jesus Christ.
Yes, it is.
I'm reincarnated. This is me reincarnating in this day and time. All right, if I wasn't, I wouldn't be here telling you that. All right. Where do I want to go now? Let's go ahead.
And point of interest, once again, the courts, we're going and speaking at a time before time immemorial. But we already know here on the King's Bench that the courts are not going to entertain any argument that's so-called predating before the year 1189. So since they already ruled against that, then there's no need to even try to speak to people about a so-called history that the courts themselves already denied to listen to. And it ain't about to change no time soon. So get used to hearing the truth and it coming out direct the way that we're bringing it to you.
Let's just show them what this means, time immemorial. Because most of y'all talking about y'all ancestors come from time immemorial. You don't have a clue of what this means.
This is a legal term.
It's a legal term. Read it for him, Archbishop.
Time immemorial is a phrase meaning time extending beyond the reach of memory, record, or tradition. Indefinitely ancient, ancient beyond memory or record. In law, It means that a property or benefit has been enjoyed for so long that its owner does not have to prove how they came to own it. In English law, in its derivatives, time immemorial means the same as time out of mind, a time before legal history and beyond legal memory. In 1275, by the first Statute of Westminster, the time of memory was limited to the reign of King Richard I, beginning July 6, 1189. That was the date of the king's succession. Since that date, proof of unbroken possession or use of any right made it unnecessary to establish the original grant under certain circumstances.
Okay, understand what's being said. Who is this king? He's from the Plantagenet crown.
Yes,
He's
he is.
descended from my surname, Jefferson, Godfrey, ruler of Jerusalem. This is why New Jersey is called the Garden State.
The Garden
We're going to
State.
show you. Give me the second, the Plantagenet and Gibeon crown. This is my father's house.
Mm-hmm.
This is my father's house. Y'all don't know nothing about that. All right, but for the sake of that, we already did lessons on that. We're not going to go back and repeat that. Let's get to the reason why we really did this video. Let's go here. Read this, what that says.
It says, in 1596, well, first we'll say the title, Too Many Blackamoors, Deportation, Discrimination, and Elizabeth I.
Okay, let's find out who she is first before we even talk about her, because they're dealing with Moors, Brother Cujo. Whether you call yourself Black or Moor, you're still in the same category.
Exactly.
For all my Black brothers and sisters out there trying to identify or trying to find out a way to identify yourself, it better not be Moor. Because we're going to show you how the House of Tudors stole your birthright.
Exactly.
All right, from my father's house. Before we do that, let's look at the House of Tudors. Find out who these criminals are.
And point of interest, they started after the 15th, 16th century, start classifying all so-called melanated people as so-called Moors. Mm-hmm. And that was done to, like the king said, to remove us out of our birthright inheritance.
Mm-hmm. Y'all, Brother Cujo, listen, bro, because you deny me in front of my father now, I deny you before his face. So you're given a second chance. You deny me now, and I'll forever deface you before my father. It ain't my words, it's already written in the statute. It said it. Isn't that written in your law?
Mm-hmm. This
is parliamentary law we're reading right now. Whatever makes any legal instrument, what makes it legal is the documentation on the actual document that gives it a legal effect. And everything that's legal ain't lawful.
Ain't lawful, right.
All right. Read this, Archbishop.
It says the House of Tudor was the House of Tudors was an English royal house of Welsh origin, descended from the Tudors of Penmynnydd. Tudor monarchs ruled the Kingdom of England and its realms, including their ancestral Wales and the Lordship of Ireland, later the Kingdom of Ireland, from 1485 until 1603. With 5 monarchs in that period: Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I. The Tudors succeeded the House of Plantagenet as rulers of the Kingdom of England and were succeeded by the House of Stuart. The first Tudor monarch, Henry VII of England, descended through his mother from a legitimized branch of the English Royal House of Lancaster. Now, let me explain that legitimized. This was an act that was done by the Roman Catholic Church to legitimize that lineage or that side of John Gaunt's descendants, which was the House of Beaufort. The Beaufort lineage was not legitimate, and it had to become legitimized by an act of the Roman Catholic Church. But that still goes outside the laws of England or the Kingdom of England via succession. All right, so it says, at descended through his mother from a legitimized branch of the English royal house of Lancaster, like the cadet branch or a cadet house of the Plantagenets. The Tudor family rose to power in the wake of the Wars of the Roses. That was 1455, 1487, which left the Tudor-aligned House of Lancaster extinct in the male line.
Did y'all hear that? Extinct.
Henry VII succeeded in presenting himself as a candidate not only for traditional Lancastrian supporters, but also for discontented supporters of their rival Plantagenet cadet House of York.
Stop. That's all we need to read. So as we can see, through the House of Tudors, we can see Elizabeth I descended down from Henry VIII, Henry VII, Henry V, I mean, the 6th, the 5th, and the 4th, and so on down to John Gaunt. Because John Gaunt was the son of Edward III. Edward III was the last agnatic king of the French and England uniform rulership under the Kingdom of England and France, which we'll get into later. All right. So let's look at the act passed by Elizabeth I from the House of Tudors before we even get into what we call Virginia and Spain and the Great Britain rulership here in North America. Because you must understand this before we can get into that. All right. That tell. Okay. Read this CNA, Cujo, because this is going to happen to you.
All right, so it says, in 1596, Queen Elizabeth issued an open letter to the Lord Mayor of London, announcing that there are late divers, black Moors brought into this realm, of which kind of people there are already here too many, and ordering that they be deported from the country. 1 week later, she iterated her good pleasure to have those kind of people sent out of the land, and commissioned the merchant Caspar von Senden to take up certain black Moors here and around and transport them into Spain and Portugal. Finally, in 1601, she complained again about the great numbers of Nagars and Blackamoors, which, as she informed, are crept into this realm, defamed them as infidels, having no understanding of Christ or his gospel, and one last time authorized their deportation. England was, of course, no stranger to strangers, nor to discrimination against them. As Laura Hunt Youngblood has shown, European immigrants constituted a noticeable part of the English population, starting in the 12th century. Although they could gain some rights of citizenship, the crown taxed or restricted their residency whenever political or economic expediency warranted. Elizabeth herself repeatedly authorized the expulsion of immigrants. Yet, Elizabeth's orders to deport certain Blackamoors are, in fact, unique, for they articulate an attempt to put into place a race-based cultural barrier of a sort England had not seen. The expulsion of Jews, a cultural barrier of a sort England had not seen since the expulsion of the Jews at the end of the 13th century, and that's 1290 for those who don't know. In justifying the geographical alienation of certain Nagars and Blackamoors, the Queen sets them categorically apart from her own liege people. While she figures the English in terms of their national allegiance, pay attention, because once again, brothers, we keep telling y'all we're English.
Yes, sir.
While she figures the English in terms of their national allegiance, she designates the Nagars and Blackmoors as a kind of people, those kind defined by skin color, the blackness stressed by Nagars and Blackamoors, and associated less inclusively with religion or lack of religion. Most are infidels. That is, against the contrasting national identity of her subjects, she depicts and condemns Nagars and Blackamoors generally as a race, a black race. These documents have become pivotal to critical assessments of the material and ideological place of blacks within England, as well as early construction of racism and race within English literature of the period. Critics have read Elizabeth's letters as the visible signature of the imperial metropolis' nervous writing out of its marginalized other, and have taken the writing out of blacks as the writing in of a derogatory association of blackness and race. Debates continue over when this equation finally stabilized and when blackness supplanted religion as the most important criterion for defining otherness. Early modern scholars tend to place the emergence of a color-based racism at the end of the 16th century, 18th century scholars at the end of the 18th. What complicates any such designation is the fact that constructions of race and blackness emerge within the complex of social, economic, political, religious, and natural discourses. Now, all of them engineered to produce national or racial boundaries. While the result of articulations such as Elizabeth's may have been the inscription and predication of a racist ideology that defined and derogated black subjects categorically, the marking of race and color was not the only issue at stake. And
one more, read the last one.
All right, in fact, although Elizabeth presents the presence of blackamoors in England as a local and internal problem, prompted by the fact that of late diverse blackamoors have been brought into this realm and added to a population that already numbers too many. Her efforts are framed by a much larger long-standing conflict, England's ongoing war with Spain. That conflict.
That's it. That's it. That's all we just said. England's ongoing war with Spain.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you listening, Cujo, because now we're about to get into real estate. Give me 1 second.
And point of interest, we know the so-called Moors came into Spain in 711. Now, they came into Spain. That doesn't mean you was originally there. So who was originally there in so-called this place, which is called Spain, which we know is actually Aragon, Castile, Leon. It was Berbers. These people were Berbers. And these Berbers or Hibernians were actually the heirs of the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, that goes back to the ancient Goths, who are also the Germanic people that you can call the Anglos, Saxons, and Jutes that compiled together as so-called Germanic tribes, but you can call us today as the English people. This is the reason why we say, even for you to understand this information, you have to understand it from a lineal perspective. You have to be an heir. If you're not an heir, you really can't be talking about other people's problems. Like right now, how we're speaking, only we can come and talk for the English. Nobody else. Everybody else may think they know our history, but at the end of the day, the history is going to play out via the heirs by their blood.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Archbishop. Okay, let's go here. Albion. He who writes your books set your timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Albion was an alternative name for Great Britain. Now remember, we reading in English.
Exactly.
And we're reading a story told by somebody else. Right? They call it Britannia. All right? They also call Albion Alba. All right? It says, it is sometimes used poetically and generally to refer to the island. Important word, key word, island. An island is surrounded by all sides with water, but it's less common than Britain today. The name for Scotland in most of the Celtic languages is related to Albion, Alba in Scottish, Gaelic, Albane, in Irish, Nalbin, and Manic, and Alban in Welsh and Cornish. These names were later Latinized or Romanized as Albania and angelicized as Albany, which were one alternative name for Scotland. All right? New Albion and Albineria, or Albion of the North, was briefly suggested. It heard it, Albion of the North. Key word.
Albion of the North.
Albion of the North were briefly suggested as names of Canada during the period of the Canadian Confederation. I hope you listen to this uh,
Joe.
Cujo. I hope you're listening to this. It ain't my words, it's history. And apparently you don't know it. So I hope all your followers or one follower is watching this so you can go back and question Cujo on what you heard here from the Third Temple English Church, from the King of England. Why? Through Hereditaments. Why? But because of my surname.
Mm-hmm.
You gave yours up to be something that you're not. All right? Let's go here. Arthur Phillip, first leader of the colonization of Australia, originally named Sydney Cove, New Albion. But later the colony acquired the name Sydney. Sir Francis Drake gave the name New Albion to what is now California when he landed there in 1579. All these places are called New Albion, and they're spelled in English.
Mm-hmm.
When the story is being interpreted, of course, they're going to say it in a language that's preference to theirs, such as Alba, Albion, whatever. What was it? Alba, Albany. All these different translations
Albania
is not how we call it. We call it Albion.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Or Albion. But yeah, like you said, many people have came and called it many different things than what we called it.
Mm-hmm. It says the root of Albio is found in, remember, somebody else translating, not us. This is what they come in. They're just trying to discover what Albion is. We don't need discovery. We own it. It's a Lodio. If you don't know it, then it's not a Lodio. Keyword. If you don't know it, you don't own a Lodio. So, Brother Cujo, if you don't know this history, then you don't own it.
You don't own it.
That's simple. He who names it claims it.
And we're going to verify it through that surname, your settlement certificate, i.e. your birth certificate. Mm-hmm. And that's why we keep saying that you can't fake the funk on this path. You know, you can claim to be everybody else when you don't have anybody holding you accountable. But here you held accountable. You can't just say you are so-called this or you're that, because they're going to actually see your documents to prove it. And we know as them being so-called trustees, they've been keeping record and they've been keeping track since what year, King?
What was it? 1790?
No, since the Anglo-Powhatan War.
Oh yeah, that's going to show you in the map.
Yeah,
I'm just talking about as far as the first population after the Powhatan War.
Oh yeah.
1790.
Exactly, but they've been tracking. They've been tracking Christ, or who was going to be able to bring in Christ since the Anglo-Powhatan Wars.
Mm-hmm. Very important. Powhatan. All right. The root albio is found in Gaulish and Galatian. Albio, world, and Welsh elflin. Welsh elbin, earth, world, land, country, or district. It may be related to other European and Mediterranean toponyms. All right. Originally whitish, it has two possible etymologies. Etymology was created by Isidore Seville. We don't need to read all that. Let's keep it moving.
Now pay attention to what we just told y'all. Albion means world, district, country, territory. However we use it, it can mean all of that. And we're going to show you that that's exactly how they meant it for. All
right. Now we're going to speed up to today to prove it, because the calendar is very important. Is that the name Albion was used by Isidore of Chaprak, 1st century BC to 1st century AD. Very important. The names refer inequivocally to Great Britain, but this enigmatic name for Britain revived much later by Romantic poets like William Blake. Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Did y'all hear that? Romantic poets like William Blake did not remain popular among Greek writers. It was soon replaced by Britain, and meaning the adjective British. So British and Breton are not English.
Exactly.
Because they're not from the Albion. Because the word for them is called Britannia, which is the word for Albion, which we know means all, the world, the country, district, etc. So we know districts are part of the county. We know the county is part of the state. We know state is part of the whole territory.
Whole territory.
Now we got different states. Prior to the 1787 ordinance, we only had the colonies of what we call England, allowed under the 1606 charter for the 13 British colonies and the charters from France and Spain.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into that. We're going to disqualify that right now. This is knowing your history. All right. Time era is 1 BC to 1 AD. This is the year 950, 951. This is the time of Jesus Christ, known as King Edgar the Peaceful, which is this guy again. Let me show you. This is who we worship, him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's me reincarnated in this day and time. He looks exactly like me. This is why I know all about his life. All right. So since we're talking about first century, 1 BC and 1 AD, let's go look at the calendar.
Pay attention, everybody, because once again,
just go ahead. Berber. Since y'all want to, Berbers are not Moors. Moors are Berbers, but Berbers are not Moors.
Exactly.
We're going to go, a lot of stuff can be said on Wikipedia, like you said, but it's the key words that you got to listen to. The term Berber comes from another interpreter, i.e. the so-called Greeks, which are the so-called Egyptians, right? And we know Egyptians is a Greek word from Egyptos, which invaded the land of the Berbers going back to the 22nd dynasty of Shishak or Shishong, and the Bible is called Shishak. So the term Berber comes from, and they all descended down from the Bubasite dynasty, going back to the so-called Cat Bass, who was married to Ptah. These are all these Egyptian deities who were all worshipped through the kings of England. Before she was a little cat, she was a lion.
It's a lion.
In England, they got lions, not cats. All right? You got to know all the abstract versus the concrete, Brother Cujo. In this case, it will be Anubis, and Anubis represents the dead. So follow Anubis to life, and this is the way, through me. All right? It says the word Greeks call them barbarians, and we know they mean warlike because we were warlike beings, exactly. Like we're doing now. We're forced to become barbarians and protect our states because you are trying to invade it by way of you being a Viking. We know that the Vikings were those who were Spaniards, those who came over here through conquest and pillage. Mm-hmm. Romans also used the word to refer to the neighbors to the north and Germania, and roughly in the areas that is Germany today, as well as the Celtics, Iberians, Gauls, Gothic, and the Thracians. Among the oldest written, now all this is abstract, what they just said. That's abstract because somebody else is telling the story. But it says amongst the oldest written attestations, this is proof. This is evidence. Key words. Mm-hmm. You read a whole bunch of stuff, but it don't mean nothing if it's not attested to. It said attested of the word Berber. I didn't have Arabic or Berber language. That's an English word. It said this English word is attested in the 1st century AD by Perfidius of Erythria C. All right, so let's go to 1st century AD because they're talking about a calendar now. Now we can go somewhere because we got a date.
Exactly.
We got a date. So let's go to a date, 1 AD. 1 AD is a Gregorian calendar. Gregorian calendar goes back to Pope Gregory the 13th and most of the world. It was the most introduced October 1582. So that means all the stories dealing with Rome, Julius Caesar, Babylon, Egypt, all this stuff is promulgated by the Gregorian calendar, which was created in 1582. And that includes the history dealing with the Muslims, or that you go by a Muslim calendar, but still don't predate the Berber calendar, because that proves that you're not a Berber.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't go by the Berber calendar, which is the year to us is 2971, then that means you're not a Berber. If you're not a Berber, you're not an Englishman. Why? Because the attestation goes back to the time of the 1st century BC and AD. And Berber year, what year is that? 951.
951.
Guess who was ruling in the year 951? This king right here. Jesus Christ. Mr. Know-it-all.
Exactly.
This was ruling. 1 AD. And while we call him Jesus, look what's going on in the time era of 1 AD. It says the Almax. Almax means Old Mexican. This was Albion Van Sertimer. See me in the hospital one day working at Robert Johnson, and he was in the bed and damn near fell out because he seen me. And all he could do was point. So he knew what he was looking at, like that guy in Coming to America. Oh, King, King, King. He knew what he was looking at.
Now, point of interest, what you're showing here, like it says, the Olmec second phase, civilization 1 AD. But we're telling y'all that the Berbers were around. So, so the Berbers and the Olmec around the same time. Pay attention to what we're showing you.
Sertimer told you that. He told you that the Olmecs and the Berbers were the same family. And the Olmecs goes back to Albion. Mexico. Yep. Mexico. Olmecs. We're about to show you is Albion, who was born in 1 AD. Jesus. And we know we ain't talking about 1 AD because that calendar didn't come until 1582. So the only calendar you can put is Berber calendar, which is the year 951. 951 AD, Anos Dominios. Didn't it say Anos Dominios?
Anos Dominios.
The one before that says 1 BC, which means before Christ. So it means before that, there was no Jesus Christ. Do you hear me, Brother Cujo? I know what I'm talking about. I am him. I am he who is waiting for. My time has yet not come. But it's here now. And you'll be the first one to be thrown out my father's house. Okay. Let's go back here. Let's go back up here. And look at the date. Do you see an English calendar here?
No.
Now, this is 1 AD. Julius Caesar, 1 AD. But how can there be a Julius Caesar if the calendar was not created until 1582? So the only calendar that existed at that time was the Berber calendar.
In point of interest, they say the Julian calendar comes based off of the Berber calendar, and Julius Caesar himself was supposed to be so-called Berber?
Yes, sir. Which we know is, we don't want to entertain that because that's once again trying to get into the blood. Right. And that's not the case here. All right. Let's go here. So you don't see no English king here, do y'all? No English king.
Nope.
But we're in the time of England. This is 950, this is Middle Ages. But ain't no English king there, but yet this king right here is ruling.
Mm-hmm.
He's the Berber. He's not an Arab because you're supposed to be going by your own calendar. Muslim calendar and the English calendar or the Berber calendar is not one and the same, because the English calendar was the Julian calendar and the Julian calendar was the Berber calendar, because Julius Caesar never even existed. Why? Because their calendar to support any story dealing with Egyptians all the way up to what we call the Council of Nicaea, all the way up to all of it is King James. It's fraud. It never existed. King James was a misnomer. He was a Roman Catholic Protestant. We're going to prove it. Because as we said to the House of Tudors, he descended down from that through kinatic succession, not agnatic. All right, let's go here. Now, dealing with, because I noticed that you had on your website posted as a sellout, the isms and schisms. All right, that's what our topic was, discussing the isms and schisms that were created by the ones who invaded England, such as William the Conqueror, not just in 1054, but 1056. This goes in the history of what we call Great Britain, i.e. Britannia, because that starts in the year 43. 43 under the Gregorian year, which we just proved don't exist. We just proved it. All right, so we're dealing with the invasion of Roman, i.e. England, invasion of Roman in England by what we call the isms and schisms of Roman Catholics, which was even practiced by the Moors, because you were offsprings of Spanish, Spaniards, Moros. All right, so we're going to show you. Let's show you what we mean by that. Because we know that the William or the feudal system was created by in 1066. The year 1066. What years is the Berber year? 2016. What is the English king in this time? William I.
Conqueror.
He descended Charles II. I mean, King James. No, actually, no.
William the First.
Yeah, King James II. One of them, King James II, because then they tutored Queen Anne. She was the last monarch of the House of Stuart.
You said William the First. I think that's supposed to be William the Conqueror. There's right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
that's William the Conqueror.
William the Conqueror. William the First. All right, son of Henry the First, son of Robert the Devil. All right, this is William. He invaded England in 1066. All right, now let's look down and see. And what year is the Berber? It's 2016. All right, let's look for an English king. Do you see it? Right there.
Yeah, that's
the English king. So he was not a Berber. He was just an English king who invaded what we call Albion, also called England. The reason why we're not just throwing out England is because our history is preserved there. That's why we call ourselves the English Anglo-Saxon Berbers. Because most of the history of us, according to Berbers, is in English, as far as we know. And we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't speak those languages that they say the Berbers speak now. Why? Because there's no records here to preserve that.
Exactly.
Until there's some records brought forth, we ain't using that. It's considered to be abstract in the court of law. All right. So we're showing you that according to the calendar, the Berbers were always here according to the calendar that was there as the Berbers. Now let's go here. Let's go here. Roman bread. First of all, let's go here. What they think we lying.
Once again, like you said, we're going through the history that we don't even have to even entertain because, like the court already said, we already have an English right that predates or goes all the way back to the time immemorial. And we don't even have to tell you or explain how we came about to come with this. It's already written down and solidified.
And we're just doing it as a kind of style.
Yeah.
And you still can't disprove this. All this is from incorporeal hereditaments that's passed down through genetics. There you see the fleur-de-lises. We know when you're dealing with the French Revolution, going all the way back to the kings of France, that the first inherited king of France was Edward III from the House of Plantagenet. The fleur-de-lises is from France. Berber, history, family crest of coats of arms. It's England. Why? Because it's in English. That's why we refer to it. Coats of arms fall under the laws of incorporeal hereditaments, meaning that we can't touch it. The only way we can prove it is through a coat of arms. So this is what we're doing. History of the name Berber begins with the Anglo-Saxon tribe of Berbers. How do we know that? Because we know the first king was King Edward the Peaceful, also known as King Edward the Peaceful. And we know that the first assumed English king was William the Conqueror, invaded in 1066, when he brought in Roman Catholic teachings.
Exactly.
Through those isms of schisms.
Through the
under
feudal
what we
system.
call Western Europe. We're going to prove it. We're about to prove it. All right, let's see. The history of the name Berber begins with Anglo-Saxon tribe. It's derived from baptismal name meaning son of Barbara. In some instances, the name may have also been nicknamed for someone such as a Moor or a Berber who appeared to be of North African heritage. In such cases, the name is a reference to the Barbary coast of North Africa. And that's all you need. If you study the TNO map, and you will understand what we're talking about. Because if you know it or not, all those Berber tribes are not associated with what we call Eurasia. It's associated with what we call the Anglosphere.
Anglosphere.
If you ever heard of that term. You don't know that term because you're not from the Anglos ancestry. You're not part of that, brother. You already proved it. Let's go on. All right. So we already know you don't come here. So based off Queen Elizabeth I from the House of Tudor, you got to go back home. Deportation. We're going to prove it right now. You're here now in Canada, which was part of the Commonwealth. So the Commonwealth abolished the Kingdom of England. They abolished it. in 1634
And
or
point of entry,
1635.
and the Commonwealth was equivalent to the Republic. Commonwealth and Republic are one and the same.
One and the same.
Like the king said, the Commonwealth, i.e. the Republic, overthrew the monarchy. So these are, and the Republic, that's going back to Rome. So anyone who keeps saying that they don't want to go back to a true monarchy was ran by the Kingdom of England, or by the King of England, the King of Peace, and that means that they're supporting Roman tactics or Roman policies. Because as we just shown you, Rome, them were the ones that brought in the so-called Commonwealth, which is the Republic.
As you can see, it says right here, Western Empire, we direct here from the Frankish states. See Carolingian Empire. Carolingian Empire goes back to the Merovingian dynasty, known as the Clovis culture, here in what we call Albion, which you now call Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
All right? These were the ones who were under the authority of Spain and France at that particular time when Albion was established by Francis Drake. If you know your history, of course you don't know it because you are Moor.
Mm-hmm.
And you was not told to know this history. Why? Because you're not from here. We want to prove it. Chiro. It says the Western Roman Empire, 1418 AD. Now we know that's a bunch of bull crap because AD started in 959-51. Prior to that, this is all Berber tribe using the Berber calendar. It goes back to time immemorial. We say 1189, it goes back further. Why? Because when you go back to Shishak, he was from the Bubaside dynasty, go back to Baz, and we just told you back then they were called a lion. All right, that's where the movie Black Panther comes from. Black Panther, as you can see on my family crest. The Western Roman Empire in 418, Roman Empire followed the abandonment of Britannia. We know Britannia is called Albion. All right, let's prove it. Look where Britannia at. Prehistoric Stonehenge, sub-Roman bread. That's England.
Mm-hmm.
They're over here in England, so-called England. Because England, this is just an overseas possession of the territory that England is stemmed from.
Exactly.
Ireland, Scotland, and England. All this is the UK. All this, France, Spain. All this is Rock of Gibraltar.
Mm-hmm.
All this is considered Anglo-sphere.
Yep, especially
everything from the horn.
Mm-hmm.
Everything on up here from the horn to your left is called Anglo-sphere, Anglo-America. And we know America didn't get here until 1783. So prior to that, it was just the Anglo-sphere. It was all England.
Mm-hmm.
Got to get knowledge. Let's go back here. We're going to prove it. Because when England was invaded in 1066 by William the Conqueror, this was a result of what we call the schism. This is why you made a remark on your channel about the sellout in regards to ism and schisms, in regards to the martyrs and saints, in regards to Jesus Christ. We just proved to you who the real sellout. Because you worshiping the martyrs and saints of Rome, while we worshiping the martyrs and saints of Jesus Christ, who actually lived on earth. Exactly. It was Rome who gave you that abstract Jesus Christ coming out the sky. Come on, man. Why? Because you got a cloud title in lieu of D. Look up cloud title when you deal with real estate. It's a cloudy title. It's abstract because there's no historical chain to support your deed, because the deed, as I said, descended from a charter. And our charters were granted by the House of Planters under John the Magna Carta, which is called the Great Royal Charter. But you don't know a thing about land, bro. Not a thing. Augustus. You see that name? We're talking about right now Rome,
Mm-hmm.
Western Europe, Chiro. That's reference to Jesus Christ. All right, that's a symbol.
Absolutely.
And it also represents the Berber symbol. Head, arm, leg, penis. You look at the Berber sign. Greetings, C.A. Cole Judah.
Greetings, C.A. Murphy from the Noble House of Murphy. Can't hear you, CA.
Can hear you, CA.
Yeah, still can't hear you.
Still can't hear you, Noble. Can't hear you, CA.
Excuse me, my internet is a bit shaky right now. Is it?
Yeah, mine's been like that all day too.
It's just fire, bro. We beating up the etheric ethers. All right.
See, this is
We're breaking bread, bro. We're giving it to them. All right. We're dealing with the Western European, i.e. in Rome, Great Britain, which we know is Albion. All right. We know the Albion Empire stretches far than what you perceive it to be. Now, dealing with the Holy Roman Empire, which you know, Roman Empire invaded England in 1066. How we know that? Now, we talk about 1066. We just showed y'all on the screen, 1066. Now, we're going to show you that this just didn't take place in the Anglosphere. It also took place in the, which in the Western Hemisphere. It also took place in the Eastern Hemisphere, where they actually came from, with the same throwing God, William the Conqueror, through the great schisms of 1054. And in lieu of what we call the coronation ceremony in regards to the martyrs and the saints. Let's read it. East and West schisms. I just said it. East and West schisms. Want to read this, CA?
Unmute my phone.
You have a problem?
East and West schisms.
You okay to read?
Can y'all hear me well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. My internet is a bit shaky. Here we go.
We'll let you know if there's a conflict with the language getting across.
Indeed. The East and West schisms, also known as the Great Schisms or Schisms of 1054, was the breakout of communion, which occurred in the 11th century between the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. The schism was a culmination of theological and political differences which had developed during the preceding centuries between the Eastern and Western Christianity. A succession of ecclesiastical differences and theological disputes between the East and Greek East and Latin West preceded informal split that occurred in the 1054. Proponent among these were the succession of the Holy Spirit, filial crests, whether
what it says,
living or unleavened bread. Yes, living or unleavened bread should be used in Ecclesiastic Bishop of Rome claim to universal jurisdiction. Do you want me to qualify what's being said, or would you got to?
Yes, go ahead, qualify. Okay,
so the edict all over after the Punic Wars is that everything is Christianized, anything else is heretic or paganism. So the Berber tribes now are throughout Europe and all over the world, as it were, is going through these Inquisition style edicts that are changing the format of how to worship, and is causing a split in theology, politics, etc. at the time. And this is, all of this is preludes to war. This is how we're ousting people from their their positions as monks and as high popes and etc. So all of this right now is just formality. We talk about isms and schisms. So, the same things that break up knowledge today, the one thing people don't apply, which is the principle of love in their development of knowledge, because then the informal breaks in what they consider to be truth or what is considered to be righteous is developed in your purpose or your ism or your schism. You're pushing forth an agenda through some form of indoctrination, be it outside of love. Anything is vanity when you're thinking about getting a quality of knowledge. So here, these people now are going through a bunch. Here it says the universal edicts being cast or being posed by the Pope as to how shall we worship? Should we worship this way or that way? What's acceptable? We all supposed to become from the one family, the human family. So what is acceptable as a form of worship between the different tribes, as it were? So this is what develops in a latter day and modern day ism and schism, is the perpetuation of one body of knowledge being absolute truth over the overall agreement upon the simple love principle, and then the human principle, and then all others, fall into place, as it were, in a greater state of understanding. So now this is causing a division in all bodies of politics, theologic, politics, and etc. So as we were saying, whether
let me interject right quick. Hold on, CA. And the qualifying and coming back on what CA just said, this all goes back to, as we said, the Gregorian calendar, created by Pope Gregory the 15th, but sent back to the Gregorian Reformation by Pope Gregory the First, where all the Anglo-Saxon tribes were converted into Christianity. It's called the Gregorian mission.
Yes.
So, Brother Cujo, you have to know this history to be able to spell the myth. All right? Carry on, CA.
All right, here we go. So whether living or unleavened bread should be used in a acrostic, the Bishop of Rome claimed Eucharistus. The Bishop of Rome claimed universal jurisdiction, and the place of the See of Constantinople in relation to the Patriarchy.
Hold on for a minute. Hold on. Now, Eucharist just means communion. All right? That's all it is. It's a ceremony celebrating Jesus Christ. That's all it is. And you get into Clifford's Inn, learn about the Clifford's Inn. That's what we did. And if you watch our previous podcasts, you will see what that truly symbolically means about Clifford's Inn, which these brothers are partaking of. They're actually partaking of the same ceremony that you're reading about from an abstract standpoint. And this is brought into, as we continue with the Norman invasion in 1054. Let me just go there. Norman conquest of South Italy. Read that, CA.
All right, Norman conquest, Southern Italy. Kingdom of Sicily, 1154. The Norman conquest of Southern Italy lasted from 999 to 1139, involving many battles and independent conquerors. In 1130, the territory of Southern Italy united as the United Kingdom, the Kingdom of Sicily, which included islands of Sicily and the southern third Italian peninsula, except Benevento, which was briefly held twice. The archipelago of Malta and parts of North Africa. Litterians, Norman forces arrived in southern Italy as merchants in service of Lombard and the Byzantine faction. Communicated news swiftly back home about opportunities in the Mediterranean. These groups gathered several places, establishing fiefdoms and states their own, united in evaluating their situation, elevating their situation to de facto independence within 50 years of their arrival. Unlike the Norman conquest of England, 1066, which took a few years after one decisive battle, the conquest of southern Italy was a product of decades of numbers of battles, few decisive, many territories were conquered independently and only later were unified in a single state, compared to conquest of England in a unplanned and disorganized but equal complete.
Okay, so as we can say, as a result of the isms and schisms implemented by the Roman Catholic Church by the invasion of England and as well as its overseas possessions, we have now been subject to an influence of Roman Catholic, i.e. Protestant Anglican customary laws that were not our own. So now what we're going to show is, as we said, in Great Britain, and we know that Great Britain, i.e. Albion, was invaded by what we call conquests by the Normans in 1054, to our neighboring brothers over in Eurasia, i.e. Africa, etc., as well as those over in the Western Hemisphere. And this was done under the House of Tudors through the breakdown, as we said, the House of Tudors. The House of Tudors invaded those preceding kings and queens who were ruling based off agnatic succession. So this gets into what we're talking about, Albion, because as we said, Albion is an ancient term. Let's go and see King Jesus, i.e. King Edgar the People, as Augustus, because it's just another term, just like king. All it is a term, a title.
Yep, Augustus Caesar.
Yeah, Augustus Caesar. The word Augustus Caesar or Julius Caesar was called Nova Caesarea. Caesarea was the name for what we call Jersey, which became what we call Nova Caesarea, which means New Jersey, because we know New Jersey was called Berwick of Jersey, which is the flag you see behind CA,
Exactly.
called Judah. And that goes back into the history dealing with Albion, when Spain succeeded the territory to France, and France succeeded the territory to Great Britain, which didn't come in the picture till 1707. All right. Well, let's go into the meat of what we're trying to tell you, all you Moorish Americans. Okay. Albion. Well, I already said the word Berber is attested to the 1st century, which is 1 BC to 1 AD, is the year 951, where actually King Edgar became king in 959. So he's 13, he's around 12 or 13 right now. The same year Jesus Christ actually ascended to the throne. So there's a comparison. Read the book called Rules of the Clan by, what's his name? A professor from Rutgers University. I'll get the name for you later. But it tells you right there that they considered King Edgar to be Jesus. Same customary, the age, the date, etc. All right. Now, mind you, the new year for the Berbers is January the 14th. The very day I was born. The Berber calendar that they use today, red, black, red, green, and yellow, with the red sign of the Yaz, it was created in 1970, the year I was born. They didn't change the new year to January the 1st till 1582, when Pope Gregory the 13th institution of the calendar. Prior to that, Julius Caesar's new year was January the 14th, which was the day I was born on. And that goes back to all the Berbers, all the way back to Bash. It was called, in the so-called language of those who borrow our history, Yanene.
Yanene.
And it was and it takes you back to Shushan, because it was only 26 dynasties of English rulership, now called Egyptian rulership by those Egyptians, i.e. Romans, i.e. Greeks. All right, what's that, CA? Oh, there you go. There you go. Got to get these books, y'all. I think Archbishop got that in one of the flips in the opening of our website. All right. So now we're talking about Albion, brothers and sisters. We're talking about Albion. And the ones who migrated to England with the schisms, which were Romans, we called it as Britannia.
Exactly.
So we don't get Great Britain till 1707. So it had to be called Albion because Albion goes back to the kings of England of the houses of Wessex, known as Ashton, because the kingdom of England lasted from 927 to 1707, which established what we call Great Britain, which the Romans called Britannia. I hope you're listening. I hope y'all listening. It says in 930, the English king, Ashton, used the title Rex ex Primicerius, pronounce that, Archbishop.
Rex et Primicerius, Torius Arbionis Regni, which means king and chief of the whole realm of Albion. Let me repeat it. Primicerius Torius Arbionis Regni, king and chief of the whole realm of Albion. And his
now this is the English king,
mm-hmm.
y'all. We speak English in here today. We got English law here today. We got English customs here today, but ain't no English people here.
No, we're on the
No
census,
English
man.
people. And we're reading and we look the complexion of this guy in 930.
Exactly.
Look at that. That's Ashton. Echo means blood. Ston means stone.
Yep.
These are all saints. You see that?
Monks.
I hope you see that, Brother Cujo. These are monks. Look up the Byzantine monks, School of Black Abbey. All right, this comes from St. Augustine, who Christianized all the so-called Anglo-Saxon Berbers to adopt Christianity, as I just stated, to the Gregorian mission, and instituted some fake story that goes back to 3rd, 4th, and 5th century, which is abstract. Why? Because the calendars support the story then wasn't put on the scene until 1582. But here we're reading an English king that can be recorded in English history where all records come from. Because the language is still preserved today. All that stuff you see in those writings and that other language, that's not English.
Mm-hmm.
That is not English. That's some stuff that they want you to believe English came from, and that's not the case. All right, let's go back here. So Ashton called himself king of Albion. His nephew, Edgar the Peaceful, this is Edgar the Peaceful, look just like me.
Hmm.
This is what he called himself. What was that? Albion. Augustus, Emperor of all Albion, in 970. Of all Albion. Now you're getting into giants.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they tell you that this guy called King Edgar the Peaceful, the king of all of Albion, was existed back here with giants. A land alleged existed in various forms of giants, were either the original inhabitants or the founders of the land named Albion. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, guess who's telling the story? Jefferson.
Godfrey of Monmouth.
Godfrey of Monmouth. That's Jefferson.
Exactly. And his words were considered fact all the way up until the 17th century. So whatever he said happened, and that was considered history. And we accept the history at that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now let's get there, y'all. You see that flag behind my CA, Archbishop Belmont? Coadjutor, Bishop Murphy. Now this is very important, Cujo, that you see this flag, because you're gonna be seeing it every night you wake up. Every night you go to sleep, and when you wake up, you're gonna be seeing it in your dreams. Mm-hmm. Why do I say this? Albion College. All right, this is the East. We're just dealing with the Eastern Hemisphere, right? We ain't even gotten to the West yet. But we're going to show you how New Jersey, New Jerusalem, because we know that New Jersey before it became New Jersey was called Jersey, and we know New Jersey, i.e. Jersey, is the Garden State, which is called New Jerusalem. That's why it's called Normandy. That's exactly why it was called Normandy. The beach of Normandy, the Atlantic coast. Come on, man. Read this, Archbishop form.
All right, New Albion was a short-lived 17th century English and Irish colony in the area of modern-day New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland in the United States. colonization was unsuccessfully attempted by Sir Edmund Plowden under the authority of a charter granted by Charles I in 1634.
Stop. Okay. Now we have to understand what's going on here. But Charles II, de facto king. Why? Because he ruled under the Commonwealth, which abolished the Kingdom of England under Parliament in 1634. All right. This became the 13th British colony, now known as the United States. All right. Now we know that before the province of New Jersey was established in 1664, the province of New Jersey, under what we call charges given to George Carteret and John Berkeley, which were dissolved in 1624 back to the Kingdom of England, which was the first ruler we showed you was Asselton, who looked just like you, but you don't want to be him. And they ruled Albion going back to the time that King James talked about damn giants. Come on, bro. You playing with gods here. Why? Because these were gods. These were lords. These are your peers. All right, read what it says.
It says,
Point of
go ahead, CA.
Go ahead, CA.
Oh, I mean, I just like to pull out my family crest right here, the cherry tree.
There you go. They chopped it down.
Kingdom of Kingdom.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
we talk about the usurpation of monarchies and the crown colonies and how in a time people want to reject their plausible ancestry and heritage, denying their mothers and forefathers and their ancestry. I mean, it don't make sense when all the proof, I wanted to make this clear and just show this before you went on, as we read the Kingdom of Ireland, the Kingdom of England. We know I've done the history, we've done the knowledge on what this means, but I yield. I just wanted to make that little inquiry.
And for all those who don't know, let's just click the Kingdom of Ireland real quick. It goes back further than that, but we're going to show the relation to the Kingdom of Ireland.
I can't take
the
no
territory of the kingdom has formerly been a lordship ruled by the kings of England, founded in 1177 by King Henry II after the Anglo-Norman invasion of Ireland.
Yep.
Do y'all see that? This is how noble CA is. He's a part of my father's house. He's aware of this.
That's why, point of interest, why the Magna Carta and the preamble, John says the lordship of it's the lordship of Ireland. And when he said the lordship of Ireland, he's announcing all of the territories that he have jurisdiction over. And like you had said, King and CA, that's what we're showing our families' allegiance together underneath one roof, underneath one king. We may have been other kings in our own polity, but we recognize Edgar the Peaceful as the emperor, and anybody who came from him, we recognize as the king as well.
All right. So it says, colonization was unsuccessfully attempted by Sir Edmund Plowden under the authority of a charter granted by Charles I in 1634. The charter was formerly to the Kingdom of Ireland, which was in personal union with and dominated by the Kingdom of England. In that sense, New Albion was an Irish colony. Very important. Settlement was first attempted under the command of Plowden in 1642, but this ended in the attempted mutiny, after which Plowden managed New Albion from the colony of Dominion of Virginia. We ain't talking about Ireland, England, and Scotland. We're talking about right here in Virginia, the so-called colony set up under Elizabeth I, called the religious settlement of Elizabeth's religious settlement by King James. All right, who was not the king of England. We proved that to you. Selling rights to the adventurers and speculators until he returned to England in 1649. Listen, y'all. Despite further attempts to return to his colony, Plowden died a pauper. A large area of his claim was later given to the Duke of York by Charles II to John Berkeley, first Baron of Berkeley of Stratton and Sir George Carteret, and became the province of New Jersey. This was 1664. All right. Till it was usurped. Till it was returned by Queen Anne in 1702. All right, this when New Jersey state legislature was established. Follow the rabbit hole, y'all.
Yep.
Governor Winthrop wrote in his journal that Sir Edmund Plowden returned to England for supplies, intending to return and plant Delaware. And if he could get sufficient strength to dispose the Swedish, soon after Plowden reached England, there was published a description of the province of New Albion. All right. So as we see New Albion here. Now this is going to be very important, brother. What's his name? Cujo, as well as the other viewers. Now look how broad Virginia is going to be. All right, because this was supposed to be the first colony to be established, and we talk about Albion, and we talk about Virginia in the same manner. Now listen to this. This is a 1651 map showing New Albion, a map of Virginia discourse year by John Ford, which was published in 1651. This is the map. This is the map, but I'm not going to get. So I'm going to use this very same map. Okay, here we go. You guys see this?
Loading up now. Okay, yeah, we see it. The Sea of China and the Indies.
Okay.
Pay attention to that. The Sea of China and the Indies.
Now this is another this is a whole new landmass. We're gonna go all the way through this map. So as Archbishop said, hold on. So it says, the Sea of China and the Indies. Now, it's just like Tino map. You have to flip it counterclockwise in order to understand it. But we're going to give you a viewpoint from, like I said, we lower, so we view things from up on high. So this is what we're going to show you. This is a map, and it shows you Sir Francis Drake was on this sea and landed in 1577. And 30 degrees he took possession in the name of Queen Elizabeth, calling it New Albion. Do you hear that? We talk about Sir Francis Drake, named it in the name of Elizabeth I. I just called the Elizabeth Religious Settlement. Now we talk about Sir Francis Drake, and we have to look at King James. Two very important people. All right, because they all were working for the Kingdom of England under charters called the Plymouth Colony, the Virginia Colony. You want to say something, CA?
Plymouth Colony, I'm right with you. Plymouth Colony, London Colony, Virginia Colony.
And they all got revoked in 1624 because of the headright system of apprenticeship of the so-called Englishman, now we classify as Native Americans. Because no Native Americans didn't come in till the headright system was established through those founding fathers who had declared their independence in 1776 by the Committee of Five. And Thomas Jefferson was amongst them. All right? Declaring your independence don't mean you're independent. You can declare something. That don't mean that's the case. All right. So here we hear the authority of Sir Francis Drake creating a settlement or a colony called New Albion. You see it right there. Now, this is what we call California. Where am I CA from? This is California.
You can see it.
Yeah. They don't believe us, Archbishop. Let's show y'all.
Doing your homework for you. It's cheating. Go ahead.
1 second. New Albion. Here we go. This gets to Francis Drake. Now we on the look where this at, y'all. Look where this at. This is way the hell over on the Pacific coast.
The West Coast. Yep.
West Coast, and we're under the authority of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen, de facto ruler of the territory under the dominion of England that goes back to 927, with people who look just like us. All right.
In point of interest, the word Pacific also means peaceful. So another name that they did call King Edgar the Peaceful was Edgar the Pacific.
The Pacific, yes, exactly. They call him Edward the Pacific, and now we know that the case. But we just showed you he was Emperor of Albion.
Albion. Yep.
I'm on the cut down. All right. So this is Albion on the Pacific or West. Read this form, Archbishop.
Says Albion, also known as Nova Albion. Let's repeat. It says Albion, also known as Nova Albion.
New Albion.
So they renamed it. Was the name of the continental area north of Mexico, claimed by Sir Francis Drake for England when he landed on the North American West Coast in 1579. This claim became the justification for English charters across America to the Atlantic coast and soon influenced further national expansion projects on the continent. Today, Drake's landing site is known as Drake's Cove, which is part of the Point Reyes National Seashore. Drake.
Okay, this is even before. This is before even King James even gets to Virginia.
Yeah.
So, it's before he gets to Virginia. Go ahead, CA.
Yeah. So you with royal charters granted, this is where manifest destiny comes in. Go west, young man. How the West was won. All these terms that people were using in modern day pseudo theology, which is the Eurasian modern explanation for the westward expansion in the Americas, as it were. But these were all done under the corporate charters de facto of your royal charters. I yield. I just wanted to put that in.
Okay, well said. Archbishop, you tell her this one.
Okay. It says Drake.
One more.
Go ahead, Sia.
Go ahead, Sia.
Oh yeah, one more thing. That the capital of the sacrament, which is currently controlled in the Khalifa territory, or the California territory, is right off the shores of that being what I guess is San Francisco's Northern Bay coast, which is the most equitable port in the California, opposed to that of San Diego, Los Angeles. But these are where they set up their establishment, as it were. Yep, I yield. Go ahead.
Well said.
Yeah, perfect. You said. And like I said, soon everybody's going to see why things are strategically placed because of their usurpation of the English people's estate.
Now go straight to the point, Archbishop.
All right. So it says Drake, after successfully sacking Spanish towns, plundering Spanish ships along their eastern Pacific coast colonies, sought safe harbor to prepare his ship, a Golden Hind, for circumnavigation back to England. He founded in June 17, 1579, when he and his crew landed on the Pacific coast at what is now Point Reyes in North Carolina. While encamped there, he had friendly relations with the coast Miwok. Now, these would be considered indigenous or aboriginal people today. The coast Miwok people who inhabited the area near his landing, naming the area Nova Albion, or New Albion. He claimed sovereignty of the area for Queen Elizabeth I, an act which have significant long-term historical consequences. Sailing away on July 23rd and leaving behind no colony, Drake eventually circumnavigated the globe and returned to England in September 1580. Over the years, numerous speculative sites along the North American Pacific coast were investigated as the area of Drake's New Albion claim. Through the following centuries, various cartographers and mariners identified the area near Point Reyes as Drake's likely landing place. It's going down a little bit further. All right, so it says in the 20th, 21st century, definitive evidence was gathered, particularly regarding Drake's contact with the coast Miwok people. We write down at the bottom. All right, so now let's go ahead and go to, like you said, go straight to the meat. It's all the way down before you get to the meeting of the people.
Yeah.
It's under English response. Yep, all the way down.
Right.
Yep, if that's the last, last paragraph in that. All right, so it says, because of the extent of Drake's New Albion was vague, essentially a classification of the territory north and west of Spanish territory, the designated locations differ among maps. After Elizabeth's death in 1603, maps began to depict the area of North America above Mexico as Nova Albion. Drake's claim of land on the Pacific coast for England became a basis which influenced subsequent colonial charters issued by English monarchs that purported to grant lands from sea to sea. I repeat, purported to grant lands from sea to sea, the area from the Atlantic, where English colonies were first established, all the way to the Pacific.
Did you hear that, Brother Cujo? Did you hear that? From sea to sea, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, as well as all overseas possessions. That is Albion. Because we're talking about Albion, and we're talking about Francis Drake doing business for a minor that was not a descendant of the Kingdom of England. But yet she was doing business for the Kingdom of England as trustees. Continue on.
So it says, along with Martin Frobisher's claims in Greenland and Baffin Island and Humphrey Gilbert's. Oh yeah, good job. What's your mom? All right, Martin Frobisher's claim in Greenland and Baffin Island and Humphrey Gilbert's 1583 claim in Newfoundland. New Albion was one of the earliest English territorial claims in the New World. These claims were eventually followed by settlement of the Roanoke colony in 1584 and Jamestown in 1607.
Okay, so here we go. So we see that the Albion established by Francis Drake preceded the Roanoke colony in Jamestown. Roanoke colony is up here in Bergen County.
Exactly.
Wahapo Native American tribes, which don't have jurisdiction over here in regards to property rights in lieu of real estate. You know, there's Jamestown. Jamestown also had a territory called the Albion colony. So now you got an New Albion over in the west from Francis Drake, and you got one over here in the east by what we call Edmund Plody. Let's look at that one.
In our point of interest, remember, everybody who's coming over here who's making a claim now are working for Rome, because Rome never knew about this place. So they knew about it back then, who were part of the empire. That's how we're speaking about King Edgar the Peaceful. Rome wanted to take over everything that was the English folks. So the only way for them to figure out what all that we have, they had to come into the kingdom, either through marriage or through some form of conquest, which we already showing you. If you look at all of these so-called old buildings over here, these buildings can be traced all the way back to the so-called Goths, which we know today are, if you look at also too, Edward Confessor, what he had told them to build, these are all considered either Gothic or Anglo-Norman architect. And we're showing today, no one has been able to prove that they have created it. And only people who actually look like they supposed to be there are the descendants of the English.
Well said, Archbishop. And as we stated before, we have an Albion in the west, called New Albion, now named or misnominated as New Albion, as well as one over in the east by Edmund Plowden, given by a charter of Charles I, then given by James II to George Carteret and John Berkeley, which they surrendered back to the crown in 1702. I mean, in 1702. The Charter of Virginia was revoked in 1624, and the charter is given out by James for George Carteret and John Berkeley, who renamed it as New Jersey. Prior to that, this was called Belwick of Jersey, the same flag you see behind CA Core Judah behind it. All right, so since we're discussing both Albion, let's look at this map again in regards to Edmund Plowden's establishment, because it said that the Albion colony in California was established before the one in Roanoke and Virginia. And we know Virginia was established in 1607 by King James, the sixth of Scotland, and the soon to be the first king of England, which got his authority by way of Queen Elizabeth I, who sponsored the colonization by Sir Francis Drake on behalf of the Kingdom of England. And we know, dealing with the Colonial title, as I explained in my last lesson, large land territories was under Colonial title under the King of England prior to the feudal system coming into play by William the Conqueror, with its influx of what we call the isms and schisms that resulted from history that never existed by way of the Gregorian mission created by Pope Gregory I in the 5th century, all the way up to the 16th century, with the institution of a new calendar that doesn't correlate with the solar calendar that goes back to time immemorial, going back to what y'all call the Egyptians. All right? So just look at this map. The map gonna tell it all, because as we said, dealing with the first colonization by Sir Francis Drake in the 15th century, which was said from sea to sea. From sea to sea, when we talk about real estate, y'all, we're not talking about an address, apartment complex. We're talking about subsurface, surface, and air. All that is considered real estate property, which belongs to our ancestors who were lords. But they got you looking for somebody in the spook. That's why you have a cloudy title. Only spooks live in the clouds.
Exactly.
Only spooks live in the cloud. Only spook angels fly in the cloud. Look up a cloudy title. A cloudy title is an abstract title, which makes the abstract property free and simple. And free and simple is by no means entail, because it doesn't belong to heirs. It belongs to trustees of an estate that's entailed, handled by an administrator, such as the power of attorney, who took our estate by a process called common recovery. Common recovery is by means of a legal fiction, i.e. a corporatized person. Mm-hmm. We discussed all this, Brother Cujo, but you know not a thing. So we're talking about Sir Francis Drake. All right, now let me go zoom back out of here. Now, this whole map says what, y'all?
Virginia.
Virginia. Do you see that, Brother Cujo? The whole map says Virginia. All this was sponsored by Queen Elizabeth I. She not only sponsored King James, but she sponsored Francis Drake on both sides of what we now call the Anglosphere, what you call America, California, and what we call the Atlantic Sea coast. All that was a result of what we call the 1787 Ordinance. First time fee and simple was ever established here in North America under feudal tenure. This goes back to William the Conqueror when he brought over the Roman Catholic teachings under what we call the English Reformation of the Roman Catholic, of the English Church to the Roman Catholic Church by way of conversion, by way of force. But as you can see here, a map that says Virginia. Let's blow it up again.
And now, point of interest, because as we see, we have to turn it upside right, because when you see the fleur-de-lis facing towards the east like that, that's letting you know,
right here.
That let you know the east is north, because the fleur-de-lis north is supposed to be forking up north. So how, like it says, Sir Francis Drake area right there, they're showing you that area is California, and that's the sea over there. When you turn it sideways, this right here is the Atlantic. So so they're just trying to give you a different orientation of how, this is the Atlantic right here. Yeah, this is Virginia, They
All
got
this is the Atlantic.
yeah. So like how we're
And
looking
this
at
is the Delaware.
we're looking at it as if we were coming in from the Atlantic.
From the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Yes. All
But
right. Now this is, remember, this is Virginia, as we just said.
Mhm.
Now, Virginia was on California because this talks about Sir Francis Drake, right? That's on the other end of North America.
Yep, that's this. Yep.
He's on this map.
So this is California then. Up here.
Yeah, so this is California as well.
Yeah.
But the whole map, it don't say California, it says
No,
Virginia.
Virginia, exactly.
All right, so if you scroll down, let me go back up. You see here, you see what's that? Let me blow it up more. What's that say? Lower Delaware Bay and River.
Mm-hmm.
Don't that say that?
Yep, Lord Delaware.
That's New Jersey. Lower Delaware. All that's New Jersey. Let's go up a little further. This is the Delaware River. How we know that? Because New Jersey is an island. It's encompassed by Atlantic Sea coast, Delaware Bay, and the Delaware River. It goes all the way up to damn Ohio. So this is all the way across mad states. But as we can see right here, let's go down. This is the Lower Delaware Bay and River. This is all New Jersey.
Yep.
All right. If you notice, go up, what that says, Nova Albion.
Well beyond.
So that's the one over on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
How we know that? Let's go a little further up and to the right. Up
north.
what it says, New France. New France, Nova France.
Mm-hmm.
So France is across the sea. So you got this the east side, and that's the west side. Because Sir Francis Drake is associated on the same map that's associated with Edmund Plodin's Albion. They're both on the same exact map. So how in the hell is that the case? That means this whole territory expansion was under what we call the Elizabeth religious settlement that encompasses the whole territory from Pacific to the East Coast.
Atlantic, yep.
Atlantic coast. All right, and we're going to close out with this. See, we use common law to support this. This is historical record because this is a 1651 map. But let's find some historical documentation under common law, because we know a legal document is the instrument, the verbiage on the actual documentation. And in this case, it's the common law. And the common law to us is statutory legislation. So we're going to close out with this, Cujo. This supports our claim, brother. If you watch the videos, you will see this. Mm-hmm. So we have nothing to prove.
In point of interest, we're going to still show you what the Miwok said when Francis Drake came here.
Let's do that first.
Because, you know, I know many of them going to say like, so, but they didn't show anything. That's not showing that y'all were here prior to. Like, no, we're going to show you. And one thing that we can't accept, that all cultures over the world recognize that there was some type of great flood event that took place on this planet.
Mm-hmm. There we go. We still talk about Sir Francis Drake, y'all.
All right. So it says, when Drake landed and his crew, the coast Miwok people initially approached his encampment while armed with bows and arrows, uncertainly cautious regarding the newcomers. But Drake quickly allayed their suspicions, and multitudes of unarmed Miwok soon visited their encampment on a daily basis. In their early encounters with the coast Miwok, Drake's crew observed as the Miwok wailed and engaged in self-laceration. Drake misinterpreted this response as—
Stop. Now, don't that sound like a priest? When they be going like that?
Yeah.
Slash themselves, priests do that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, go ahead.
Drake misinterpreted this response as an act of worship and concluded that the people believed him and his crew to be gods. However, this response was actually one of Miwok mourning customs. Most likely, the Miwok regarded the English visitors as relatives who had returned from the dead.
Did y'all hear that?
Now, like we keep saying, only reason or way they would recognize them as so-called relatives is because they have to look like them. All right, so pay attention. In a particularly significant gesture, one day a large assembly of Coast Miwok descended on the encampment and honored Drake by placing chains around his neck, a scepter in his hand, and a crown of feathers on his head as he were being proclaimed king. Upon this uncertain, seemingly voluntary surrender of sovereignty by its owners, England based its presumed legal authority to the territory.
So that's telling you that even the Native Americans recognized that this territory was English.
English.
Why would somebody who indigenous to the land recognize a foreigner as their lost alone brother from the dead?
Which means we came before them. They came after us.
They came after us.
We left.
All right. So, very well said. All right. So we showed you the map of Virginia. Any words you want to put in, CA?
I'm just looking over my tapestries. I'm looking at the feathers. I'm looking at the Jersey flag. I'm looking. I mean, you know, it's all here. It's a wonderful lesson. I thought it was beautiful. I love my brothers that take the time to explain, you know, things to the other. You know, I honor you, brothers, and then, you know, high honors to, you know, wonderful breakdown of this simple lesson as to, you know, who's running around owning clear title, who has intel title, and so on and so forth. It's just very compelling that a lot of brothers should take the time and go do their due diligence, do their research, and you know, follow up with that truth. Peace and love.
Well said. Well said, CA. Give me 1 second. Let me find it.
And point of interest is we showing you that you can have everything you want. You just got to be humble to receive it. And to be able to humble to receive it, you got to accept the laws and the principles that we come from for you to be able to partake in what is your birthright. You can't claim an identity of a whole nother nationality, but yet say you have a birthright under English. You know, that's just not how this works. That's considered, like says, stealing. You can't give you somebody else's stuff, and nobody else can give you somebody else's property. And this is the reason why you haven't heard anybody before come and bring this truth, besides two women, Elizabeth Key Greenstead and Elizabeth Freeman. They're the last two who spoke this. And that's the reason why it is imperative for those who keep saying that they're here to uplift fallen woman. If you're not bringing her back to the true church, the true visible church, you're not actually here to uplift her, but to inhibit her.
1 second, let me find it.
Yeah.
What did I say there? Where the hell is the code?
It was VA code 1.300.
Yeah, 1.
Wait, hold on. No. Let's see.
That was like Title 2 provisions. Oh, here we go. I got it.
Yeah, chapter 3.1, boundaries of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I got it. Let's see, 201, chapter 2. $3,001. All right, listen to this, brother Cujo. This is modern day statutes for you. All right, y'all can see that?
Yeah, you can probably zoom in a little bit further. Okay, perfect.
Now, this is the modern day statutes, Brother Cujo. We just gave you the breakdown of Virginia, as well as it being a part of Albion from the Pacific to the East Coast,
Yep.
to the Atlantic. We also showed you that if it wasn't for Virginia Plan and Jersey Plan, known as the Connecticut Compromise, you would have no United States. All right, watch the video prior to this one. It says here in section 1300 of the Virginia Code concerning boundaries, it says the territory and boundaries of the Commonwealth. Now, we already told you what the Commonwealth was, which took over the so-called Kingdom of England Parliament, or we abolished it through the English Civil War through rump parliament called the Lone Parliament under the House of Stewards, which left everything in place. So it says the territory and boundaries of the Commonwealth should be and remain the same as they were after the Constitution of Virginia, which was adopted on June 29, 1776, except for the territory that constitutes West Virginia and its boundaries and other boundaries just to provide by this chapter. Let's go by here, which is a bunch of crap, but we know we can work our way around that. 301. This is 301 of Virginia Code, which is the Commonwealth. We know New Jersey is a part of the Commonwealth of New Jersey based off, as I just stated, the Connecticut Compromise of 1787. The same year they had the Northwest Ordinances of 1787. A year, and they once they established that, then they created their Constitution on March 1789. A year after that, they created what they call the Residency Act and the Funding Act to fund their new establishment, de facto government, which was created by way of establishing what we call townships, if you know anything about that. But back to the statute. This is the authority to determination of the extent of the territory of the Commonwealth after the adoption of the Constitution of 1776 shall consist of: 1, the Charter of April 10, 1606, granted by James I in the 4th year of his reign. Now remember, prior to this, there was already a charter given to Frederick Strait in regards to the jurisdiction over here belonging to the Kingdom of England. So anything King James or any other king or queen under the House of Stuart does, it automatically goes right back to the Kingdom of England and disqualifies. Exactly. All right. And so this is the charter. Make reference to the charters. This is the charter. There are also treaties. What other treaty are we talking about? Section 302.
Treaties between Great Britain.
Commonwealth deals with the land, submerges land, including services thereof, lying underwater, etc. Read it on your own time. We ain't got time to do that because we already did it. We're just telling you that we got rights over the subsurface, surface, and the air, buddy. How we know that? Now, we ain't even in Virginia, but we're dealing with a charter of Virginia. But how we qualify that we have the right to a charter of Virginia is due New Jersey. And how we know that? Let's look at it. Now, see if you can do this for your students. And we're going to rest with this. If your students are looking at you right now, they should be disappointed in you.
Absolutely. And point of interest, for those who want to say, oh, statutes, that don't concern me, that's ludicrous. You know, your whole reality is based off of those statutes. Until you can present something that supersedes what the Supreme Court has said regarding who's the heirs to the land and how Aboriginal title itself is extinguished, you don't have a claim.
They want to go like case law. So they want case law. We're going to give them case law. We don't go by that. Archbishop just said, well, statutory legislation, that don't mean nothing because, you know, and they can make anything go. I'm going to show you in statutory law where case law qualified what the common law says, i.e. statutory law. Because this is common law to us. Common law says on the New Jersey Revised Statute, what year is this in? 2013. Let's go to 2020. Let's take it to 2020, just to be on the safe side. Make sure we ain't misquoting something. Corporation, religious societies. All right? We're not a 501c, buddy. We're not a franchise, buddy. We're not a capitalist incorporation, buddy. We're ecclesiastical all the way. How we know that? Because we don't get authority from the state by incorporation. We're incorporated in the state under corporation soul under ecclesiastical authority that precede the state. How we know that? Let's go ahead. This ain't new, buddy. We already taught this. Being section 12, right state under charge of Great Britain. We just said what charter, Virginia, because Virginia was actually under the authority of Great Britain in 1707 when they colonized there in 1607 under King James, which we know prior to King James settling that, all this jurisdiction was under Anglo jurisdiction due to the Anglo and Dutch War. You got to know your history, bro. So it says being section 12 of an act entitled an act to incorporate trustees of religious society approved April 9th, 1875. It's under Queen Victoria, buddy. This is saved from repeal. Saved from repeal. You cannot change it. This section vested property held under charges of incorporation, the one we just went through, granted by Great Britain, and corporations and created in place thereof. The United States is a corporation, brother. They're trustees that we just said. They're a tenant-in-chief or estates and land, and free and simple. Why? Because the land that they hold it under is not a lodeo. Now, let me tell you what happens when you have a lodeo type. This is what happened to you. This is what you can do, buddy. This is the authority we have under common law. So as we said, we coming for you. Section 4, the power of our religious society. Read them for him, Archbishop.
Title 16:1-4. Every religious society or congregation incorporated by virtue of any law of this state shall have power to A, have perpetual succession as such corporation. B, sue and be sued, plead and be pleaded in any court. C, adopt and use a common seal and alter and renew the same as pleasure. D, appoint such officers, agents, and employees as may be required for its properties, institutions, and business. E, make bylaws and rules consistent with law for the regulation and management of its affairs, properties, and institutions. F, acquire, purchase, receive, have, and hold, and take by device, bequest, or gift without limit real and personal property of all kinds, church edifices, schoolhouses, college buildings, personages, sister houses, hospitals, orphan asylums, and all other kinds of religious, ecclesiastical, educational, and charitable institutions, and the lands whereon the same are or may be erected, and cemeteries.
You hear that? Read that again for him. Read that again for him, Archbishop.
And the lands whereon the same are or may be erected, and cemeteries or burial places, and any real estate suitable for any or all of said purposes. G, lease, grant, sell, and dispose of all or any part of such property. H, borrow money for the purposes of the corporation and to give bonds and mortgages therefore on any or part of its property. I, have the management, direction, and control of all civil temporal affairs of the congregation, church, or parish. And J, exercise any corporate powers necessary and proper for the carrying out of the above enumerated powers and the purposes of the corporation and its institutions.
Okay, now this is the authority we have as citizens of Great Britain, even though we're not incorporated as a 501c3, which you are.
Mm-hmm.
You say you're not. You are 501c3, which means that you, even though you practice of faith, you are still part of the state, i.e. body of politics. You're not part of any religious society, even though church and state is separated. Why? Because you're not a church.
Not only that,
you're not a church.
Point of interest, there's only one church that's recognized over here that's supposed to be completely free, and that's the English Church. Everybody else have to be part of Rome. You don't have like that true right.
You know why they don't have it? Because you were incorporated. Now read what we have. Read this.
(16:1-30). Any church, religious society, or denomination of Christians, being the whole body of religious believers having a common faith and polity, now or hereafter to be established in the United States of America, and the supreme governing body thereof, whether sole or aggregate, shall be severally recognized in the courts of justice and elsewhere as an entity bearing the name by which it is commonly called and known, regardless of any civil incorporation. Such supreme governing body may bring any action or proceeding in any court to enforce the civil rights or claims of the whole church, religious society, or denomination.
Now, did you hear that? It said regardless of any incorporation. So, brother, based off our hereditament rights, based off incorporeal understanding of what was in our DNA, we have the right to manifest it regardless of any corporation and be heard in the court of law in lieu of our powers under Section 4 of Title 16, in lieu of the charges under Section 28, pursuant to VA Code 1-300, 301, 20, and 201. Brother, you can't drop like us, bro. This is for real here. This is the real deal. You know what I'm saying? We usually don't come out of character like that, but you keep putting us up as if we some fly-by-night scam. We don't charge nothing for this. We do this out of kindness of our heart because it's our obligation. It's our fealty that would have been left by us by the grantor, i.e. the king, who I am the incorporation of by way of corporation soul. Let's read that up, just in case you don't know that. How I become king. I'm gonna show you how. Read that in closing, CA, and we can close out.
Corporate soul. Corporate soul is a legal entity consisting of single soul and corporate office occupied by a single soul natural person. This structure allows corporation, often religious corporation or commonwealth governments, to pass without an interruption from office holder or next, giving position legal community with subsequent office holder continuity with subsequent office holders having judicial powers and possessions to their proceedings. Should I qualify? They understand that. Predecessors, excuse me.
Qualify that.
So basically, most of your businesses, churches, etc. are taxable entities controlled by via the Township Act and other acts. So therefore, you're corporatized, and this is rights saved under charters, under the royal charters granted under Great Britain. So therefore, they are exempt from their congregations being interrupted by quasi office holders, policy enforcers, etc., that may yield what they call is power of attorney over quasi subjects. So you know, if you're claiming to have i.e. any sovereignty or anything, your rights are not protected under your corporate charters or your municipalities or offices or franchisees, etc. So these rights that are saved from repeal are privy to, as it read, occupied by a single soul natural person with a structure allowing corporation, often religious corporations or commonwealth governments, to pass without interruption from one office holder to the next, giving positions legal continuity with subsequent office holders having identical powers, you see, and possessions to their proceedings, to their predecessors. A corporation soul is one or two types of corporations, the other being a corporate aggregate.
Go ahead.
Ecclesiastical origin. Most corporation souls are churches related, for example, the Archbishops of Canterbury. Although some political offices of the United Kingdom, many of the secretaries of state, Canada, and the United States are corporation souls.
Stop right there. So we know all corporations such as the Moorish Science of America are registered with the Secretary of State. You're a corporation, buddy. You're a 501c3. You're not a corporation so in lieu of ecclesiastical, such as the Archbishop of Canterbury, which is still de facto because it's abstract. That goes back to Archbishop of Canterbury, going back to the Gregorian mission, which was under the authority of Pope Gregory I, which we just mentioned. That's what we just said to you. So you have to learn how to play. We ain't playing checkers. We're playing chess, bro. And it's checkmate. All right, let's go here. And then we can end. Read the Quran.
The crown. With most constitutional monarchies, nobility, the Commonwealth realms, the crown are notable. The Commonwealth realms, the crown is a non-statutory corporate soul.
Stop. Cujo, if you can't understand what it just said there, bro, you are asleep. But I'm going to tell you what it just said. Under the Commonwealth, which resulted in the English Civil War, when they dissolved the Kingdom of England under the Parliament of England, Ireland, and Scotland, the Commonwealth now have become, under their common law, stereotypes corporation show because it says it's now non-statutory. If it's non-statutory, then what type of law you using to uphold it?
Right.
What, our opinion? Because it's either opinion or the law. Our opinion don't need no interpretation of the law because the law is specific. And we deal with Commonwealth Realm, which Virginia was one under the Crown Authority, which according to what we're reading here is non-statutory. So if there's no laws written in statutory form, then what laws you got to protect you? We showed you just now that our laws under the Crown is statutory legislation. So there's a difference, buddy. You're in the Commonwealth of Canada. So you don't go by any statutory laws. You would ever, at the mercy of whatever sovereign, which happens to be the sovereign, which means the state secretary.
Well, he's underneath the Crown's jurisdiction.
That's your, and the president is your, the Secretary Attorney General is the Provincial Patriarch. Your Provincial Patriarch, and the Secretary of State is the Partout Secretary via Trent. That's your mother and father, buddy. That is your mother and father. So in order for you to come out of the authority of the feudal tenure, you must come back into the allodial property of the land, and best believe it's not under a Commonwealth, buddy. It's on the allodial land. I would show you this, but you ain't worthy of it. We're going to leave on that. I let my Archbishop say make their last corresponding rebuttals, and we'll leave you as we greet you in peace.
Well, there you have it, brothers and sisters, and specifically he who this is tailored to. We're not here to, cause confusion. Enough confusion has been going on. This is easy and simple. You can teach this to your children and they'll be able to grasp it, especially if they're heirs, because the information courses through their blood. Now, the understanding, like how we were just showing you, everybody right now is property of the territory that they're located in, via being incorporated as property. The only way for you to come up out of there is going back to what you came from, which is the visible church. Because no man or woman can exist without having some Lord. And you cannot be a Lord or a God to yourself. You have to serve some master. So in this case, the master that we choose to serve is the same one our English ancestors served going back in time immemorial. Everybody else, we don't know who you serve. But according to who you do serve, there's no statutes promulgated today that going to be able to corroborate you having a claim to the land based off of that abstract understanding or thinking of your religion where you come from. Astrology, all of these things, they sound good. They do work if you use them properly, but it's still abstract. Unless you can make it concrete, which we're bringing to you today and showing you, it's going to be moot. You can be doing and making moves, but it's all fee simple in a fictitious world, because you have to still go back and honor your foremothers and forefathers who created that fictitious world for you to protect you as well as your posterity forever. You know, without these corporations, the right ones that they had created, our information, knowledge, and who we are will die off. But you have been incorporated into something that has nothing, no understanding of who you are or care about who you are, because you didn't care about who you are. You stopped working. You stopped doing what you were supposed to be doing. And so since you became idle upon the juries or the realms of our kingdom, then by the charters that those de facto rulers had created, they brought you into their plantation, which we call corporations today. So, you know, once again, this is not our story coming from our voice. This is our ancestor story that we're all professing, and we're speaking it in a different way, because, you know, we all have a certain way to speak a cipher, which is a circle. So with that being said, I leave the rest to C.A. Murphy.
Peace and love, gratitude. You know, apparently, you got to forgive me. I don't know the backstory. All I know is this: there was time for a servant. You know, obviously, you know, a lot of people, you know, we're seeking a lot of different knowledge. Like I said, a lot happened after the Punic Wars. I see you got Archbishop got on the screen. You know, a lot of backstory to how the Anglo-Saxon Englishmen and women, nobility, came into this place that they call modern day America, and then Canada, and then America, the continent. There's a lot going on, a lot of stories. So, you know, Rights and Tale is a big story. It's a deep story for a critical thinker. You know, in all you're getting, you know, get overstanding, study to show yourself approved. So, you know, the visible truth, you know, omission is the greatest sin. So, you know, I'm not sure exactly what we're dealing with here, but trust and believe, you know, the truth will prevail. And I trust that my Archbishop and the King Clifford Jefferson have done an excellent job of dispelling any confusion. You know, confusion is of the lower self. So, obviously, you know, partake in none of that. So I hope that, I trust that love is the ultimate in all vanity and ego we set aside for the greater glory of those who know. All right. So I trust all is well at the sound of my voice. If you didn't know, C.A. Murphy from the House of Murphy, also known as Geronimo. And, you know, like I said, the truth will prevail, and you know, any smoke, you know, we with all that, peace and love to all anything else. And my King and Archbishop will finish the rest of this tailoring.
Okay, Archbishop, last words.
And once again, you know, brothers and sisters, we live in a very urgent and critical time right now on the planet. Many brothers and sisters' minds have literally snapped, trying to understand what it is that we're bringing to the forefront. We were realizing that it was a lot easier than we have been led to believe by those who say they have our best interest at hand or at heart. We're giving you a nice and concise timeline to track yourself or put yourself into, to see yourself. If you can't see yourself in this walk, then it must mean it wasn't you. Because we know, just like we keep saying, imposters came in and took over our inheritance, and these imposters look just like us. Yeah, the truth of the matter, or the fact, is there were people who look just like you and I, came into our kingdom and usurped our property, and they start putting different people who don't look like us in positions of so-called authority to keep the confusion going on. Many people have been feeling this. You know, we see it in our everyday life. Just look around. Most of the ones who are causing a lot of their confusion and problems are people who you live amongst, who like I'm saying, who walk the same walks just like you. And all of the prophets have spoken this back then. They said the same thing. It was their own people for their own doing this for their own downfall. Nobody else came and did it. We did it. Same way Edward the Confessor, like he said on his deathbed, that we allowed those devils to come in and to do what they were doing. And once they did what they did, we lost our identity, we lost our kingdom. And that's when 1066, when William the Conqueror came in, the son of the devil, him and his minions, because remember, he's working for Rome. They came in and they brought in the feudal system and put us underneath feudal tenure. Your issues today is all based off of you've been under feudal rule. And you have the overseers who look just like you, who are still keeping it going on with the confusion, as they're keeping you in bondage in your mind. They don't have to physically have chains on you any longer. The confusion within your mind is what's bonding you up, because you won't make a move because you don't know what's right from wrong. So instead of you making the wrong move, you don't do anything at all. You just stay complacent and passive. And that's what they want.
It's chilling effect. It's
Exactly.
called the chilling effect.
Chilling effect. Woo.
Think about it. Since what? Since when did the prophet expire? 1928?
Somewhere 1935, somewhere around. I'm not sure.
I think it was like something around that time. And things have not been moving in a graceful form, period. Because it's still a lot of confusion. If everybody, like they say, a house divided cannot stand. So every so-called house or temple I go to should all still be on the same page. I shouldn't, like, for instance, when you go to McDonald's, that all McDonald's got the same order. They got the same menu. Why? I shouldn't go to any other so-called establishment like we doing here and bringing the true English church, a visible church, and getting a whole different lesson regarding who I am. We're English heirs. When I go in there, I want to get my lesson filled up to tell me about my English history. Everybody else's history, I don't need to go ahead and validate, because my identity as my settlement certificate does not say that. Everything that I've been verifying from the DNA, so-called, whatever folks want to use that, even though we don't have to use that, because the surname proves it. It's an inheritance. And that means if it's an inheritance, everybody shouldn't have it. Only those who inherited it.
That's right.
Like they say, nobility, we're the ones that left records. Everybody didn't have their records left around. That's why everybody can't find themselves. It only makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. So what we've been showing you as us being nobility, we're bringing you the records, things that have been written down by the scribes before we came back to just corroborate. It is what we're telling you today as us being English people. All of those other identities, like the king said, we may have came from those folks, but since time immemorial, 1189, we can't corroborate with the saying, like say, oh yeah, I know for sure. Only thing I can go for based what the record says in 1189 all the way up to this point, because I wasn't back there beyond that other found form. There wasn't leaving legal records. So if that's the case, then you can only use what you have today. Trying to pick up something that they already disproved and said we're not going to entertain. Why would you keep that rhetoric going when other brothers and sisters are going to try to do the same thing and get the same result? Everything we saying up here no one has been able to disprove. No one. If you're telling us that we're not bringing the truth, then please present your evidence, because our only goal and obligation is to present the truth. If we're wrong, we're wrong. Hey, shit, we messed up. But bring your evidence. And when you bring your evidence, we need to see some judicial recognition that predates the so-called 1776 Declaration of Independence, that predates the so-called 1789 Constitution, that predates any of these other doctrines you're using, so-called American Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, the Declaration of Rights of the Child, the Declaration of Rights of Human. All of these things, they're declarations. They're not laws, man. Anything that was created after 1776, if it's not recognized in their statutory system, it's not promulgated to be considered lawful forms of evidence for you to be able to use, for you to present a so-called claim.
And on
right,
that,
we should.
Well said, CA. Well said, Archbishop, and specifically Cujo. You have some soul searching to search We have provided the common law to support our claim in lieu of our estate as the heirs of the inheritance left in the trust, and which the United States are trustees of. Now, as you can see, I am the incarnation of the king. Just look at that king and look at me, man, real hard. Leave all biases to the side and look at that king and tell me if he don't look just like me. And if I was to him, how would I know the history is so clear as if he was living today? I was born in 1970. He died in 1975. He died in 1975. So that's 1,005 years short of 1,000 years. If you go back 1,000 years from him, 975 to the year 973 BC, that take you back to the King Shoshin, which is another 1,000 years. So every 1,000 years, the spirit of the deity incarnates, and it happened to be me this time. How we know that? Fletcher versus Peck. Case law, common law for the UK. So UK is qualifying in case law, said Dicey, what the statutory legislation for the common law for the English people are saying in regards to who have a right to allodial ownership of this land that's entailed, i.e. contract free and simple, which the Native Americans own, according to this case law. So look it up. Fletcher versus Peck says, was a landmark United States Supreme Court decision in which the Supreme Court first ruled a state law unconstitutional. So all law is not law. Everything that's legal is not lawful. You got a lot of stuff that's statutorily interpreted, but that's not lawful. And we know everything that's within the county municipality is not legislatively constructed. Why? Because New Jersey Revised Statute 48.1-6 says it's not. It's just there for references. So all these so-called land or property are registered by way of a deed, which is a vehicle to a title, registered in your county, in your municipality, are not legislatively constructed. So I mean, they are arbitrarious, capricious, and not outside of the law. How we know that? Case law just said it. The decision also created a growing precedent for the sanctity of legal contract and hinted that Native Americans did not hold complete title to their own land, an idea fully realized in Johnson versus McIntosh. So look up those court cases and it'll show you that a title or a deed in lieu of a land ownership by Native Americans is not a clear chain of title. Why? Because it's abstract. It was given to you by a colonist and not the king.
Word up.
And with that, we're going to say peace.
Peace.